10 years ago, Keone and Bill founded Samourai Wallet. It's a privacy-focused, fully open source, non-custodial Bitcoin wallet that also includes privacy features. Now, one of the key things here is that unlike traditional Bitcoin mixers, the Samurai Wallet's mixing service, which it's not even fully fair to call them that because of the connotations, it's fully non-custodial. The Samurai developers never had custody of user funds at any time. This is a bit of software that has been used by countless people in the United States and around the world. It's something that adds a very much needed layer of privacy on top of the transparent and public transactions that are going on in the Bitcoin time chain. Now, to give you a little bit more background on it, for 10 years, almost 10 years, Samurai Wallet operated their company completely in the public, completely out in the open, and without any enforcement action whatsoever. They were never approached by federal law enforcement. They were never told that they were somehow towing a fine line. And they thought that they were very much operating legally, as they were, because again, they never took custody of user funds at any time, which is one of the key points here when it comes to FinCEN, the financial crimes enforcement network that's tasked with basically looking after these things. So they'd been operating for almost 10 years with no issues. Then, come April 2024, about 50 FBI agents, including an armored vehicle, drones, full riot gear, raided Keone Rodriguez's house. They simultaneously raided Bill Hill's house as well. He was out of the country at that time. And this was a coordinated, basically, sting operation. The Department of Justice then charged them with conspiracy to commit unlicensed money transmission and money laundering, some other things thrown in there. But basically, central to this entire controversy is the difference between custodial and non-custodial software. Again, traditional money transmitters, they take possession of customer funds. Think Wells Fargo or really just any bank, right? JP Morgan Chase, for example. Now, these, again, are traditional money transmitters. They need to take possession of customer funds. There's no way to do this non-custodially. We're talking about the fiat system, right? Samurai Wallet, by contrast, they allowed users to retain full control of their Bitcoin at all times. Now, the developers and many privacy advocates, and really anybody with a shred of common sense, has argued that this distinction placed their software outside the scope of traditional money transmission. And actually, according to court filings received during the case, the government prosecution at the Southern District of New York had actually sought the guidance from FinCEN. So this is, again, the Treasury Department Bureau that's responsible for enforcing money transmission requirements. They sought this months before the indictment was brought against the Samurai Wallet developers. Now, FinCEN reportedly responded that Samurai Wallet did not qualify as a money transmitter, just like the founders, Bill and Keone, said. Because, again, they did not take control of user funds. They didn't take custody of funds at any time. So the Treasury Department Bureau, the government agency responsible for actually enforcing these rules, setting the rules, determining who the rules apply to, said, nope, these guys are covered. They do not fall under our jurisdiction. They're not operating as money transmitters. Therefore, if they're not operating as money transmitters, of course, they can't be operating as unlicensed money transmitters because, again, they're not money transmitters. Okay, want to make sure that's clear. Now, here's where things start to get really messed up. The guidance was not disclosed. This FinCEN guidance was not disclosed to the defense until much, much later. Now, this raised allegations of a Brady violation, which I think is very much clear here. And for anybody who's not intimately familiar with what a Brady violation is, essentially not disclosing this evidence is what constitutes a Brady violation. And that occurs when prosecutors fail to disclose evidence that could help the defendant, exculpatory evidence, basically. And this is basically violating your constitutional right to a fair trial. You are required, the government prosecution is required to disclose any information they come across, even if it may harm the government's case. Because after all, this is the United States of America. We're supposed to be a nation where the rule of law matters, where you can't just have rogue or allegedly rogue, I should be careful of my words here, prosecutors of the Southern District of New York going out and completely flying in the face of FinCEN guidance and still bringing an indictment against these guys, against Bill and Keone. So again, this case just continues to get stranger and stranger. So another thing that's very strange about it, the case was prosecuted in the Southern District of New York. Now, you may say, oh, that's interesting. So the company, Samurai, must have been operating in New York. You would be wrong. I talked to Keone last week again, and what he brought up was the fact that no, they've actually never done operated in any way in New York. They have also never, they hadn't even worked in New York themselves. They never wrote any code in New York. They never did anything in New York. How this was given to the Southern District of New York? Well, they gave it to themselves. They had an FBI agent go out in the streets because he couldn't do it right from their prosecution's office. Of course, that would look way too bad. He went out in the streets, downloaded Samourai Wallet, made a couple transactions, and poof, now it's suddenly within their jurisdiction because the Southern District of New York alleges that every transaction made in Samourai Wallet using these services was basically an unregulated or illicit transaction somehow. Again, just ridiculous, and it's ridiculous that they would have to and want to pull this into their jurisdiction. So again, this is very strange. You've got an FBI agent just going out in the streets and basically saying, "Yep, this now makes it so it's under our jurisdiction, the Southern District of New York. Let's go. Let's indict these guys." And of course, again, prior to indicting them, they heard from FinCEN. I just really want to drill this home. They heard from FinCEN that this is not a case of unlicensed money transmitting because they're not custodying user funds. This matters, right? For example, when JP Morgan, one of the largest banks in the United States, was custodying the funds of Jeffrey Epstein, and they were moving those funds around, they were in fact operating as a money transmitter. Luckily, they were a fully licensed money transmitter. And so once it was found that they were in fact laundering money for Jeffrey Epstein, they simply had to pay a very large fine. They pay these fines all the time. HSBC, Deutsche Bank, all of these large banks pay massive amounts, hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in fines every single year as a cost of doing business. But luckily, when you're a big bank and you pay those fines, nobody ever goes to jail. But when you're an open source Bitcoin software developer and you write open source non-custodial code, again, you never touch user funds, you never transmit money and hold money for the likes of somebody like Jeffrey Epstein, like JP Morgan Chase did. And this is, I don't have to say allegedly, they did this. They had reached an agreement with the government because of their actions here. But when you're an open source Bitcoin software developer, apparently not only do you get slapped with a massive fine, what they were initially threatened with was $237 million as a fine. This was basically, how did they arrive at this number? Well, it's the total amount of Bitcoin that flowed through Samourai Wallet and their services. So the government said, you have to pay this entire amount as a fine. Now, again, they never had custody of any of this money. Never, not once. They were not only threatened with that as part of the initial basically charges, but they were also threatened with 25 years in federal prison. So 25 years in federal prison, but when you get out, you owe $237 million, over $250 million or almost $250 million. That's essentially, in Keone's own words, a life sentence that they would have been given. This is just absolutely outrageous. And maybe I'll just very quickly, I'll play a quick clip so you can hear it from Keone himself, because I think that this is worthwhile to hear this. You can listen to me, but you know what? It's better to hear it just straight from the horse's mouth. Let me go ahead and bring this up. And while I do that, I'll just say this is something that really all Bitcoiners, but not just Bitcoiners, even if you're not a Bitcoiner, if you are just somebody who cares about the rule of law in the United States of America, you should care about this. So I'm going to go ahead and play this clip. This was during my conversation with Keone last week.
Our jaws dropped when we found this information out, right? And the reason you have this reaction, which is a normal reaction to have, is because you think the justice system has anything to do with justice, but it doesn't. The justice system has nothing to do with justice. It has nothing to do with truth. We like to think that the prosecutor's office is a noble office, and the role of the prosecutor is to find out the truth. But that is not the case. The prosecutor's only role is to take down the person that they've put the target on, no matter what. No matter what, even if the person is innocent. That is inconsequential to the prosecutor. The prosecutor says, we painted you with the target, therefore you're guilty, and we're taking you down. I look to my lawyer and I go, we're going to get railroaded. There's no way we're getting a fair trial here. She's going to make sure the jury can't do anything but convict us. And when that happens, she's giving us 25 years. If you don't take the deal, if you get convicted, not only will you spend 25 years in federal prison, but when you're out, you'll be responsible for paying $237 million in restitution to the government, which is essentially saying, we're giving you a life sentence.
Okay. So, I mean, you heard it from Keone himself there. This is tantamount to a life sentence and 25 years in prison away from their families, and then being slapped with a massive and just outrageous fine that has no bearing on reality. Because, again, to really drill this home, the Samourai wallet developers never had custody of user funds. So, as this case progressed, of course, this is costing Bill and Keone a massive amount of money, right? They had very restricted bail conditions put on them. They were essentially, put under house arrest during this entire time. And ultimately, both defendants ended up accepting a plea agreement to the lesser charge, carrying a 5-year sentence. And they basically, as you heard from Keone right there, they cited the risk of unfair trial and severe sentencing exposure there. It should be noted that in a very interesting break from traditional legal norms, their judge was changed during this process. So this is very strange. Really, this is not something that typically happens. You typically have one judge, and that judge stays with the process the entire time, unless the judge were to tragically pass away or something happened, health issues. None of these were the case. The judge was simply removed, and a new judge was put up there who was clearly very unfriendly to these developers. Now, again, they ended up both taking this plea deal, and the financial penalty that they agreed to was $6.3 million, down from $237 million. The 6.3 was the operating revenue that they accrued over their almost 10 years of operating this business. So that's their gross revenue, not their net revenue. That's not their profit. That's the total amount of revenue they had before paying any of their staff, before running any of their, they're doing any of their development costs, any of that. And again, this is just kind of a ridiculous judgment here. And this really has broader implications because it sets a tone that if you write open source software and you are using, especially when you're using Bitcoin or other cryptocurrencies, we have the Tornado Cash case that is also currently, they're currently looking for a pardon there as well. There's many other cases that are similar to this. So Roman Storm, Roman Sterlingov, both of those guys as well. They're really just trying to make an example out of these open source developers who are, again, not custodying user funds. A lot of this was brought during the Biden administration, and this was really a part of this Operation Choke Point 2.0 movement, where the Elizabeth Warren goons who got their way into the White House through deals that were made by Elizabeth Warren stepping down. This is not speculation. This actually happened. So she stepped down under the condition that she'd be able to get some of her faithfuls, her Bitcoin and crypto hating faithfuls, into the administration. They really just went and attacked any sort of open source software developers. So this is all just really ridiculous. And again, at the end of the day, Keone is set to report to federal prison in just 3 days' time. Now, yesterday there was a really heartening development here, and this is something that I think everybody who was paying attention was really glad to see. There's been a huge push to pardon Samourai now, calling on President Trump and trying to get a hold of anyone within his administration to be able to pardon Samourai. Because again, this is a gross miscarriage of justice. If President Trump, as he claims, wants America to be the Bitcoin and, quote, crypto capital of the world, you cannot possibly do that if you have a country where open source developers are thrown in prison for not actually violating any of the rules. Again, to really drill this home, FinCEN, the Treasury Bureau that is in charge of these things, in charge of money transmitter guidelines and rules, they said Samourai Wallet is not operating as a money transmitter. Therefore, they cannot be operating as an unlicensed money transmitter. Now, I'm going to go ahead and play this clip from President Trump from yesterday because, again, I was extremely, extremely glad to see this. Let's go ahead and roll the clip.
Mr. President, this week a man named Keone Rodriguez is going to federal prison for creating crypto privacy software. The case was started under the Biden administration, but your DOJ kept it going and secured the conviction. A lot of people in crypto are saying that this man should be pardoned. Are you familiar with the case at all, or would you be interested?
I've heard about it. I'll look at it. Why, you think he should be pardoned? Sounds like it. Sounds like, based on your question.
Many people in
Rodriguez, we'll look at that, Pam. Okay, let's take a look at it. You'll have to tell me. I don't know anything about it, but we'll take a look.
Okay, So again, this is great to hear. You see Trump saying he's not super familiar with the case. Obviously, the guy has quite a bit on his plate, being the leader of the free world. But this is really heartening to see. It's just a great example that you put enough social pressure on a movement and you make enough noise about it and you can actually enact change. And I think this is one of the cases where a presidential pardon is very much warranted. Now, again, to really make sure that this is clear, the Samurai Wallet developers, Bill and Keone, never took custody of customer funds. Yes, they accepted a guilty plea deal. Now, a lot of people may say, okay, well, they accepted a guilty plea deal. That means they must be guilty. And if you believe that, boy, I don't know what to tell you, but you have probably the logical capabilities of a small child. That is not how these things work. When you get threatened with 25 years in prison and almost $250 million in fines, you are liable to take any sort of deal that is going to make that even a little bit better. And this plea deal did. And the prosecutor's office knew that. They knew that these guys had families. They knew that they would never be able to pay off $237 million. They'll have a hard time paying off the $6.3 million. But they still knew that, hey, 25 years versus 5 years, that's a pretty big difference there, right? That's the difference between Bill would be in his 90s by the time he got out of prison. Keone in his, late 50s, early 60s. This is outrageous. And again, I believe this is a gross miscarriage of justice. In the United States of America, you should be able to write privacy-preserving open source software without the fear of having the long arm of the law unjustly brought down upon you. Because once again, to make this abundantly clear, FinCEN, who is in charge of money transmitter guidelines, said they were not money transmitters. The prosecution went ahead anyway. This is now not the first time that the Southern District of New York has gotten into some interesting affairs. There's also some interesting connections there with the Epstein case as well. I'll let you look into those on your own. They've also brought charges against President Trump. This is clearly an area of our judicial system where the rule of law may not always allegedly be respected. I'll just keep saying allegedly here so that they don't somehow bring charges against me as well. But ultimately, I think this is very heartening to see that President Trump was made aware of this in this briefing. I think that given his family's concentration on Bitcoin and clearly their concentration on crypto as well, we don't need to get into that right now. We'll try to keep this positive. But given that, I would hope that they would be tuned in enough to say, wow, this was a miscarriage of justice. This was started by the Biden DOJ. If I want to stand out and stand apart from Biden's Operation Choke Point 2.0 movement, then I need to right this wrong. I need to pardon the Samurai Wallet developers. I truly hope if somehow President Trump or anyone in his administration is listening right now, I really implore you to do the right thing, to pardon these developers, because only by really wiping the slate clean here, by righting this wrong, does America have any chance at truly being the Bitcoin and, quote, crypto capital of the world. So again, very, very heartening to see this, but there's still work to be done. There's still a timetable here. I'd just like to direct anybody, if you are as kind of fired up by this case as I am, please do go to billandkeone.org. There's links to sign the petition right here. You can donate as well. There's 7,310 signatures on this petition as of now. A quick note that you cannot donate in Bitcoin, unfortunately. That was part of the judge's ruling. Now, that may sound a little bit ridiculous, right? Why wouldn't you be able to donate in Bitcoin? It's not like, for example, and to clarify, it's not just you can't donate in Bitcoin. Bill and Keone aren't allowed to use Bitcoin or any sort of cryptocurrency at all. If they do, they basically risk getting even more jail time added, more prison time added to their sentence. So they're very much trying to stay away from that and follow the letter of the law. But this is a little bit ridiculous if you think about this, because at the end of the day, Bill and Keone, yes, they had a business that was operating with Bitcoin, right? They were a Bitcoin business. They were using Bitcoin as money. It would be, kind of basically similar to saying after somebody like J.P. Morgan Chase, who laundered money for Jeffrey Epstein, it'd be similar to the judicial system saying, well, yes, you've paid this fine now, but you're not allowed to use US dollars anymore. Of course, they would never do that, right? They would also never throw any big bankers in jail. They just slap them with a big fine. The bankers know that this is a cost of doing business. It's built into all their estimations, right? They know they're going to have to pay fines for this stuff, but they do it anyway because they know that the amount of money they make by handling these illegal transactions, by laundering money for international criminals, for people like Jeffrey Epstein, for drug cartels, in the case of some of the other big banks, they know that the profits that they achieve by handling and actually custodying the money for those criminals is far greater than the fines that they will have to pay. So again, it's a cost of doing business for them. But for open source developers like Bill and Keone, this isn't, they weren't trying to break the law here. They were trying to write open source software, which they did. They successfully operated for 10 years without any sort of enforcement actions taken against them, without any warning. And then what happens? But on in the middle of the night in a dawn raid, they have 50 FBI agents sent to their house. They're brought out in handcuffs. They're thrown in jail as they await sentencing. This is really, I think, again, just a gross miscarriage of justice. This is not how the rule of law in the United States of America is supposed to work. And ultimately, I really hope that President Trump does the right thing, that people in his administration also speak up and make sure this stays in front of him, stays top of mind, and that Bill and Keone are in fact pardoned, because this is something that I think all Americans should ultimately care about. You know, you may not, it's one of those things where it's like, at first I said nothing. You know, when they came for the open source devs, I said nothing because I wasn't an open source dev. But they will come for you eventually. If these guys who never custodied user funds can be targeted as unlicensed money transmitters, I'm certain that the Southern District of New York can find a way to charge just about anybody as an unlicensed money transmitter, perhaps just for running a Bitcoin node, right? And this is why the Bitcoin policy work that the folks at the Bitcoin Policy Institute are doing is so vitally important now more than ever. We're going to hear from a couple of them right after the commercial break here. But again, I do just want to encourage everybody to go to billandkeone.org. Again, billandkeone.org, billandkeonne.org. And please do sign the petition, donate if you can. Unfortunately, you have to donate in fiat because, again, the judge restricted them from using any sort of Bitcoin or crypto. But make your voice heard, make some noise. Talk about pardoning Samourai on X, on Nostr, on YouTube, wherever you may be. Get the message out there, be loud, and realize that this is a case that has meaning for all of us, not just for all Bitcoiners, not just for all crypto people, but for all Americans, because ultimately we have a fundamental right to privacy. And it's a great reminder that the government cannot give you any freedoms. They can take those freedoms away, but they cannot give you freedoms. Freedoms must be taken by individuals, and we should take them together. And these are the times where we need to ensure we make a stand, that we make our voices heard, and that we ensure that two men who, again, were not unlicensed money transmitters because the people in charge of regulating unlicensed money transmission said they weren't money transmitters. This is just absurd on its face. I hope that everybody pays attention, stays engaged, makes your voice heard, and please go out there and do whatever you can. Go to billandkeone.org, make noise on social media, and really let's try to get a pardon through for these guys, because this is, I think, this is a hill to die on, guys. And luckily, it doesn't cost you anything to make some posts on social media, to sign a petition, just to get this trending, to get it out in front of people so that the Trump administration pays attention to it, does the right thing, and ultimately pardons Samourai. So thank you guys very much for listening to that. And again, please, billandkeone.org, sign the petition, donate if you are able. And if you're not able, again, sharing this is free. So thank you for that. Right now, we're going to run to a quick commercial break. When we come back, we're going to have two representatives of the Bitcoin Policy Institute. It's a perfect time to talk to these guys, not only about the great work that they're doing on a number of fronts, but really to talk about what the future of Bitcoin policy looks like in America, what it takes for America to truly continue being a global leader in Bitcoin. Stay tuned. These guys do incredible work. We're going to cut to a quick commercial break. And again, when we come back, we'll be talking with the Bitcoin Policy Institute. So stay tuned. I'm going to cut to commercial right now.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, Aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin. No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick, monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to Roxham TV, everyone. My name is Walker America, and I am here with you again for the next 3 hours. I'm going to bring up to the stage now Zach Cohen. He's the Senior Advancement Associate at the Bitcoin Policy Institute in Washington, D.C. Zach, how you doing, man? Thanks for joining.
Doing awesome. We're coming to the close of a great year, and yeah, happy to be here and talk a little bit about it.
Yeah, so maybe for folks that aren't familiar with the incredible work that you guys do, can you just give a little bit of a just kind of a high-level overview of the Bitcoin Policy Institute, kind of what your goals are and what you guys focus on? And I notice it is just the Bitcoin Policy Institute, not the Bitcoin and Crypto Policy Institute. Maybe you could talk about that distinction a little bit as well.
Totally. Yeah, so BPI was founded a little over 4 years ago, and we were really the only policy organization, and still are the only policy organization that really focuses, narrowly on Bitcoin. And the thing that our founders identified in 2021, in the early days of kind of crypto being regulated in Washington, D.C., was that there really was no voice for Bitcoin in particular, right? These other cryptocurrencies, these other so-called digital assets, they didn't have the same interests as Bitcoin, right? They like to dump on retail, and Bitcoin, has no founder. There is no dumping on retail. There's just all these kind of key differences that A, change the incentives in DC, and B, where like Bitcoin just needed a voice because there is no founder of Bitcoin. There isn't, Solana founder to go to Washington, DC and testify in front of Congress. And so the other kind of key realization that BPI had was that, Bitcoin was this sort of special product. And we didn't need to lobby, basically, right? There's this key distinction in Washington, D.C. between kind of advocacy and lobbying. BPI is not a lobbying organization. We don't throw money behind candidates. We don't sort of like choose pet issues and kind of pester politicians into taking those positions. we have a team of, over 25 research fellows, sort of the best minds in Bitcoin, the Troy Cross, kind of Andrew Bailey, resistance monies of the world. And we say, hey, we want you to do this very rigorous policy research. We want to take this research, we want to take it to Washington, D.C., and we want to show policymakers that, Bitcoin is this very serious thing. There's a lot of people that like Bitcoin. It's distinct from all these other cryptos. And, we think you need to take it seriously. And the best way that we can do that is not to throw money at it, but to show, what exactly is going on with Bitcoin, and, providing that kind of like retrograde, research for policymakers to say, okay, this is actually a serious issue, and we need to start taking this seriously.
I appreciate the intro, and I do want to bring up, we have another member of the Bitcoin Policy Institute. We'll bring him up on stage right now. Stephen Pollock, Senior Vice President of Development. How you doing, man? Thanks for joining us. I will forgive your tardiness.
I'm great, Walker. Sorry for dragging in late. It was a long night, so everybody's running a little slow today. How you been, man? It's good to see you.
Doing well. Just trying to do what I can at this point to spread the good word about Bill and Keone getting pardoned. Hopefully, I was just talking about that before I brought you guys on here. And also, I think this really dovetails nicely with all of the work that you guys have done. You've also done a lot of advocacy work. Zach Shapiro specifically, writing a lot of those amicus briefs and different things for not only this case, but others in the arena. So we were just, Stephen, going through basically with Zach a little bit of kind of why BPI exists, what the goals are, and why that is really distinct in DC, and why it is very much needed in an era where, you don't have a CEO of Bitcoin, you don't have a founder that is known, and all of the various, crypto tokens do have CEOs and founders and foundations, and throw a lot of money out there in DC and get their people out there in front of it. So I really appreciate the work that you guys are doing at BPI. And maybe just a good place to kind of kick off a little bit too would just be to talk about kind of some of the things that you guys have really focused on this year in 2025, and then we can kind of set that up once we go through that to look at what you guys are focusing on as we go into the new year, as we go into 2026, which is again a midterm elections year. So it's a year where political tensions will of course be heightened. But can you walk through a little bit of some of the work that you guys have done this year at BPI?
Sure. Yeah, and to hit back on what you just said, there is no CEO of Bitcoin. There are a bunch of CEOs that work in Bitcoin, and so I think it's not just that there's not, someone who can deploy a marketing budget or a lobbying budget or whatever budget for all of, Bitcoin, which, we all agree is a fantastic thing. It's that it's also these decisions that are being made, do really impact a ton of not just people, individuals, but businesses as well. And so, without a centralized sort of node, having a decentralized sense of the economy of Bitcoin and the companies and the businesses and the people, I think that's kind of how I see it as different. It's not just that some token is centralized and then this one's not. It's that, crypto, all these other tokens and all this stuff, they're all a business. They're one business. Whereas Bitcoin is an entire economy, and it's much more complex. And we can try to say these other things are complex as well, or they're similar, and they're just apples and oranges. And I think Washington, D.C. is starting to understand that. A lot of the elected officials, their staff, are having very, very complex conversations. And actually, Ken Egan from our team on our podcast last week did a great job sort of describing the kinds of questions that he's getting from staffers. Not all of them, of course, but help me understand how the Bank Secrecy Act impacts this, that, and the other. And so explain the block size wars to me. How does consensus work? How do soft forks come? Who decided Bitcoin Cash would be named Bitcoin Cash? How does that work? Staff are asking our team these kind of questions in offices. And so how does I don't know, how do mining pools work? And like, what, all this are like just crazy questions that a year ago even just seemed unfathomable, to be honest. They're like, well, aren't you guys the same as, whatever coin? So I'm trying to be as PC as I can. I don't want to offend your viewers, Walker.
No, not all. We can call them shit coins. It's okay.
I know this is the shitcoin podcast, but anyway, so back on track. That movement that we've seen of just education level, interest level, sophistication of conversations, that's our goal, honestly, more than any of this other stuff. Because that means when people are like, oh, we're educating them about Bitcoin, right? That sounds so rote or like, just like, okay, I get it, dude. Like, what do you guys really? But I'm serious. That's the best thing that BPI can do, is for as many people as possible on Capitol Hill. I don't care if you're Republican, I don't care if you're Democrat, I don't care how you vote, necessarily. There obviously are some things that we'd like to get some wins secured on, and we like this, but if I can have a vote one way or the other, or I can have, a staff and a congressman begin to really grasp and understand not just the differences of, why Bitcoin's different or unique, but why that's the case, and then be curious about it genuinely, not just because there's a big vote tomorrow. The long, the EV of that over the next decade, regardless of administration, regardless of all these other things that we all have opinions about that are all really important, that's the biggest win that we could have any year, anytime. And so, and that's that's not as fun, that's not as cool to go talk about on a podcast like this with you guys. That's not as cool to tweet out about. Yeah, I had a great conversation today with someone I can't tell you about some things that, whatever. But that's where we're really going to win, that's when we're really winning hearts and minds. Like you, like Zach here, like everyone else, when you really started to kind of fall in love with Bitcoin, right? When you understood, when it really kind of the aha moment or whatever it was that hooked you. And then you start digging into behind the scenes, like, why is this? Why is that? And you realize this is just incredible. It's so brilliant how this works. And now I understand why people can say these like kind of things that seem crazy beforehand, like, it's the future of money or it's digital gold. I mean it, like it really is literally digital gold. You can tell people that and they sort of look at you like you're nuts, but then they start to kind of grok some of this, kind of next level, information or like kind of like understanding of Bitcoin and the network. And they're like, yeah, these guys are nuts. And this is cool. So anyway, it's kind of a twofer. That's why BPI exists. That's why it's important. That's also like our big goal. Tangible goals. I think, there's so much on the table. And I think, obviously like kind of codifying the BRCA, and, maybe getting, I know there's a bunch of people who are focused on Bitcoin Act, and there's just a ton of legislation out there on the table that would all be fantastic. And I think for me, what I'm focusing on, we have another big summit coming up. Last year we had Bitcoin for America, and we rallied leaders from all over the country and some international to come in and kind of talk about why establishing the strategic Bitcoin reserve was going to be important. And I think that proved to be the case, right? Kind of set the table, set the tone, whether you support or whether you think they will do some sort of massive buying program or not. I think it really set the tone. And I personally think it's a great idea. And I think it's going to happen. But I think there's some of our fellows are kind of turning their attention toward quantum and some things like that. I think, you name it, man, we're going to be on top of it. So It's going to be a fun year. It's also, there's a little pressure because, it's a little bit of like, is this going to be the last year where this isn't, sort of a lame duck vibe in DC? Is this kind of our last opportunity to get some of this across the finish line? There's, you mentioned the pardons, like obviously that would be fantastic Christmas present to a lot of people. But developer protections, making sure those sorts of things aren't happening again, not just one or the other, but both would be incredible. So anyway, Zach, I'm gonna kick it over to you as well. I've been rambling for really
Well,
since you came on. This is why I'm late. I want to give you guys a chance to talk before I show up.
I love it. No, I'd maybe like to just kind of to dig into a couple of those pieces there, which is specifically around the developer protections. Because again, right now there's this massive push, and it's great to see this sort of groundswell movement to pardon the Samourai wallet developers. Obviously, they're not the only ones who are currently being prosecuted or persecuted or in the process of this. You've got Roman Sterlingoff as well. Ian Freeman, a slightly different case, but one that's a little bit, maybe not as well known, but should definitely be out there as well. But as it relates to the policy side of this, I mean, I know there's a couple of different bills that are out there. There's the market structure, there's the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, and kind of there's some different ways that developer protections are woven into those a little bit. Can you talk about those at a little bit of a high level, like how that actually works, what the because I think a lot of people hear these things like market structure or Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act or whatever, BRCA acronyms, and they think, okay, they just tune out. But can you give a little bit of the why this matters, especially maybe we can start from the developer protection side and then maybe zoom out a little bit more to the more holistic view?
Yeah, totally. I'll give you like a little bit of a brief history here because, it's helpful to kind of track the way that these things have progressed over the course of the year. So I think it was kind of like early Q2, maybe mid Q2, that the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act was introduced. And that was a bipartisan bill between Congressman Richie Torres, who's our friend up in New York, who has been, fantastic on digital assets more broadly. And then Tom Emmer, who's the House Whip. And so he, holds a pretty significant power, in the House of Representatives. And so to see, both a bipartisan support for that bill, as well as a pretty major Republican in the House, come out and co-sponsor that, that was a very big deal. And that bill was a short bill. It was, maybe a page and a half. And, just broadly speaking, it created this cutout for, developers of non-custodial, some people will call it non-hosted wallets, tools, basically exempting them from any money transmitter licenses, anything basically relating to what, a traditional sort of financial company would be doing, right? With the ability to stop transactions, to surveil transactions, which we know obviously not to be the case with a lot of these non-custodial tools that were being built, like, Samourai Wallet and Tornado Cash. And so that was a fantastic development. We were thrilled to see that come out. I think Coin Center, our friends at Coin Center, have been working on that for quite some time. And so, seeing a little bit of early support for that was awesome. And then let's see, I think, within maybe a month or two, that started to, talk was rising that was going to get absorbed into the larger market structure legislation, at which point I think it was the Clarity Act that was, prior to it being introduced in the House of Representatives. And you can think of market structure legislation as like one of the, the big kind of like omnibus, crypto regulation bill, right? What's a security? What's a commodity? Which agencies have jurisdiction over what, right? Those kinds of questions. And we saw, an opportunity along with other folks in the industry to say, hey, this seems like something that could fit inside of this bill. There's already a fair amount of momentum on this. People have been working on crypto market structure legislation for like 4+ years at this point. I think originally introduced during like Trump 1. And so, there's a pretty significant sunk cost with that piece of legislation. Or, a lot of the more kind of centralized crypto companies have been pushing on that because, again, that they do have a pretty significant interest in having clear regulatory rules about what it means to, launch a token and what the kind of timeline is for, okay, I launched my token, now I can sell these pre-mine coins, all those kinds of details. And so for the longest time, we really had no kind of skin in that game. We said, hey, look, Bitcoin is already pretty clearly a commodity. We've heard that kind of over and over again. And, we don't really see any need for legislation to codify that. And then, this summer when the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act did get lumped into the Clarity Act, that was when we said, okay, hey, we're gonna put our weight behind this a little bit more. And so that piece of legislation did pass through the House, including the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act provisions. So think of that as kind of a pared down version of the original BRCA bill. And for that to pass the House was massive. It is important to note that there's a difference between getting legislation through the House and the Senate. Getting it through the House is a little bit easier. The Senate, works with the filibuster rules, so it will take some moderate Democrats to, jump on board, and that's the kind of battle that we're seeing right now. And I will just say before, turning it back over, one of the things that we're watching very, very closely with this market structure legislation is that, whatever kind of compromises need to be made as we reach the end of the year and into early next year in terms of getting this over the finish line, that those compromises don't include getting rid of the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, right? I think there's a very possible world where, big crypto, right, centralized crypto, the Coinbases of the world say, hey, we don't really care about developers, right? Like we want to sell our shit coins and we want to make money on it. And, it's kind of the like short time preference, like thinking, hey, these developers are important, but my business model is more important. It's like, well, actually, this whole industry, including your shit coins, rests on developers being able to write code freely and, not being thrown in jail. And so, yeah, that's something we're like laser focused on going into the new year is, hey, how do we make sure that if, Elizabeth Warren says, hey, I don't know about this whole illicit finance thing, I think we need to be, we need to come down harder on these developers. How do we make sure that that's not what they get rid of? So that's kind of the lay of the land.
Yeah, and Zach, I want to turn this, or Stephen, I want to turn this over to you as well. But maybe I would just throw in there in between. I think that this is really so important because you mentioned Elizabeth Warren, and I've often said I'd rather have a government full of Senator Lummises than Senator Warrens. That's really kind of how I view a lot of the efforts that BPI is undergoing, is to create more people that are aligned with folks like Senator Lummis, who is an outspoken Bitcoin advocate, versus Senator Warren, who is incredibly antagonistic to Bitcoin and, quote, crypto. It also makes me think back, all this talk of illicit finance and developer protections. It makes me think back to all of those hearings where Elizabeth Warren lined up all of the big bankers, Jamie Dimon among them, of course, CEO of JP Morgan Chase, who, of course, very publicly just entered an agreement to pay hundreds of millions of dollars as a fine because of their business dealings with Jeffrey Epstein. And, because they were a licensed money transmitter for Jeffrey Epstein. And many of these other banks, again, HSBC, Deutsche Bank, they're licensed money transmitters for international drug cartels and international criminals. And meanwhile, you've got somebody who's sitting there from their bully pulpit, Senator Warren, asking these guys for advice on how should we regulate Bitcoin because of all these worries about illicit finance. And they're saying, oh, so, we need to regulate it. Meanwhile, of course, they're the ones who are actually laundering the money, right? I just had to, the more that I think about this, the more it just is so patently absurd on its face. It's just, it seems like it's a parody, but it's not. And, all jokes aside, these are real people's lives who are at risk here. You've got a couple of guys who now, Bill and Keone is scheduled to go to federal prison, supposed to report there on December 19th. So I think a lot of this stuff is really, it's not just about these guys now. Like right now, this is the push, but it's also about, as you mentioned, making sure these protections for open source developers who are writing non-custodial, software, which is on its head just like a weird word, right? To make it non-custodial. It's just software where the individual is in control. That's it. But we need to make sure that those protections are enshrined moving forward. But Stephen, I'd love to get your take as well on this, just kind of piggybacking off of what Zach said there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I understand the, you know, there's definitely some dark humor in it because it's just so ridiculous, like you said. But you know, it would be funny if it wasn't so just horrible, you know. But it's just so, you know, it's so ridiculous that yeah, you know, you just gotta kind of stop and laugh at the gall, I guess, of some people. And I think there's a little bit of personally, there's a little bit of a callous maybe that's built up of just being, whether it's, you know, in DC. I've never lived in DC, but I spent a lot of time up there. The rest of our team does live in DC, and then just working at state level politics, working on campaigns. And so I've sort of seen the duplicity, you know, most of my career. And so maybe, you know, but it also is, you know, it's still, sometimes it's just still so surprising, like this, you know, what you just described with these major international corporations doing far, far worse things. And, you know, getting away with it every time. Tale as old as time, I guess. But yeah, I think codifying these rules and, you know, codifying this into law would be, I mean, it'd be a beyond a landmark win. And as far as, you know, predicting if and when, and the threat of just some parts of this getting, you know, axed in, you know, some sort of deal making at the last minute. Yeah, I mean, that's a very real threat. There's the, if you're not at the table, you're on the menu, which I think, you know, we've talked about, you know, a million times. And I don't, you know, it's not just us, but there are a number of groups and individuals that have done everything they can to make sure that we're not on the menu, especially with these protections in the BRCA portion of Clarity. But I think that soon we will learn I think we will learn a lot about who we have and who we don't have, and who we can trust and who we can't. And so I'm hopeful, you know, but I think we'll learn a lot going into the midterms about a lot of people on some of these votes, especially this one. And so you know, I think it's a no-brainer. I think anyone with a conscience, it's a no-brainer. But we'll see.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I think we can't assume that there's that everybody has a conscience that we're dealing with here. That's a bit of the difficulty. You know,
it's fair to assume that definitely not, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. Unfortunately,
dealing with most of the issues that we're dealing with.
Well, right. Well, you know, 1% of the general.
I'm far from perfect, but I think this is pretty black and white.
Yeah. Absolutely. Well, hey, I've got a number of other things I want to dig into with you guys. We are going to go to a very quick commercial break and then be right back. But when we're right back, you know, we've been talking a lot about the, let's say, freedom go up side of this, the FGU, right? But as you know, as Alex Gladstein has said, the NGU is a Trojan or horse for the FGU, right? Number go up makes the freedom go up. Getting more people on board the Bitcoin network really helps to strengthen it overall and create more advocates for Bitcoin. And I think one of the key things that people are paying attention to on the number go up side is the strategic Bitcoin reserve. So I want to dig into that with you guys when we come back. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and we will be right back here on Roxham TV. Don't touch that dial.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to Roxham TV. My name is Walker America. I'm here with Zach Cohen and Stephen Pollack. They represent the Bitcoin Policy Institute, doing great work in Washington, D.C. While they may not be able to drain the swamp, at least they can orange pill some people there. Welcome back, guys. So we talked a little bit about some of the work that you guys are doing on the regulatory front with the market structure bill, the Blockchain Regulatory Certainty Act, some of the developer protections that are enshrined within that we hope to get through and actually codified into law. Now, another piece of let's say potential legislation that is right now an executive order, but has the potential to be codified into law, is the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve. Can you guys talk about this a little bit and kind of some of the advocacy that you're doing there? Because for those that don't know, a lot of the language that was in those executive orders was actually basically crafted by the Bitcoin Policy Institute. You guys played kind of a key role in helping to shape some of that language, which I think was really excellent. But can you talk about sort of where we're at right now? Because I think a lot of people saw this initial announcement, went, "Wow, this is this is pretty wild. This is crazy. This is even happening. How fast is this going to move forward? Is the government going to start using various budget neutral ways to start acquiring Bitcoin outside of just taking it via confiscatory measures?" And now maybe there's been a little bit of a lull in the action. So is there any update on this? What are you guys looking at? Is there still a push for this in DC, or how are you guys approaching it at BPI?
Yeah, I'll kick us off here and then hand it over to Stephen. BPI was really kind of the first organization to put serious thought to a strategic Bitcoin reserve. I think the first time we heard those words strung together was in Nashville in the summer of 2024. When President Trump, got up on stage and said, we're going to build a strategic Bitcoin reserve. And then, probably like 10, 15 minutes right after that, Senator Cynthia Lummis got up on stage and said, we're going to buy 1 million Bitcoin. We're not just going to make this little reserve, and we're not just going to take the Bitcoin that we already have and stash it away. It was like, no, we're going to buy a meaningful percent of the total Bitcoin in circulation. And we're going to hold that for 20 years. And we're going to build the Fort Knox of Bitcoin using, self-custody, all these things that were just so far outside of the Overton window, at that point in time. Right now, we're like, oh, okay, well, we there's a chance we get a strategic Bitcoin reserve, and that's not like a crazy possibility. But to hear that come out of the mouth of soon to be president and a sitting US senator was just like mind blowing for somebody who's kind of thinking about these issues on a day-to-day basis. And so we followed that pretty shortly after with a super extensive white paper. It was like 50 plus pages on, basically why the United States should create a strategic Bitcoin reserve and, what the steps to implementing that would look like. And that got to the administration. They read it, they looked at it. And then come March, I can't remember the exact. It was like March 8th or March 9th. There was a executive order signed on President Trump's desk to establish a strategic Bitcoin reserve to basically hold the existing Bitcoin that the federal government already owned, and then to consider budget neutral acquisition methods for acquiring additional Bitcoin. And the other part of that executive order was the digital asset stockpile. And I think a lot of people miss this, but those are two separate things. They're not saying, hey, we're going to have a strategic Bitcoin reserve with XRP in it. That's not what that's not what the executive order said. It said, hey, we're going to have this strategic Bitcoin reserve on this side, and then we're going to have this, stockpile of shitcoins on the other side. And, we're going to consider ways to purchase more Bitcoin, and we're going to potentially sell all the shitcoins, right? Like that. If you read between the lines on that executive order, that's basically what was policy coming out of the White House. Like it is now, illegal to shitcoin in some sense, right? From the highest office in the United States and maybe the world. And so, that arc of basically like summer 2024 to executive order March 2025 was just unbelievable. It was probably, David Zell at the start of our March event said, when they write the history books for this century, like this executive order is probably going to be included. This is just a monumental piece of policy, and the speed with which it happened was just unprecedented. And so there was also a kind of lag after that speed, right? Policy doesn't move very quickly in Washington D.C. typically, and so. I think people were like, hey, we moved so fast and we got this executive order so quickly. Why is the statutory or, legislative strategic Bitcoin reserve taking so long? And, we can dig into that a little bit more, but, I would say this is exactly what we expected. In fact, getting the executive order as fast as we did was wholly unexpected. And so, that's not to say that we've lost any momentum on the proposal. It is very, very much still, on the minds of legislators in Washington, D.C. And, next year, I think, fingers crossed that market structure gets over the finish line, will sort of, open the door to reconsidering the strategic Bitcoin reserve. Yeah, Stephen, anything to add on that front?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier that this is how symbolic it was. I think something can be symbolic and also not merely symbolic, right? There are things that we kind of carry as like, yeah, this was this, watershed moment, or this is, kind of what broke the levee type of thing. But it can also be more than that, right? The bat signal isn't just symbolic, it's also like terrifying if you're a criminal, right? So there's more there, but it was this like symbolic, like momentum changing, like Zach was talking about, kind of history book worthy moment. But if you look at most of those moments in history that we read about, in like 6th grade or whatever, or at least we used to get to read about. I don't know anymore. But
who knows what the kids are reading about these days?
Right. Who knows? Though, when you kind of dig a little deeper, while this was, and I'm not comparing this to any specific moment in history, but once you dig a little deeper, it's like, well, there was all of these things that happened before, and then here is all the things that happened after, and this sort of took years to really to really happen, but we want to consume it quickly. It's like, yeah, this is when this executive order, strategic Bitcoin reserve happened. And now we're sort of in reality of how is it implemented? Now let's codify it through Congress, because now, another executive order can cancel out this one, right? And so there is so much that's happening, I wouldn't even say behind the scenes, just like in the sort of day-to-day political, kind of boring, inch by inch, moving the ball down the field. But there's a ton of activity around it. And I think I have just a bunch of random notes. There's sort of the political component of this, which was, people running for office and giving campaign speeches, and then we're in, and promises made, promises kept, which is important, right? And then there's the policy side of it of, okay, how do we draft the bills? What about this? Oh, we didn't think about that. How are we going to make sure that there's no backdoor here? Or what are we going to do with the Bitcoin? Who should own it? And there's the plumbing. There's like the plumbing part of like, okay, we have a Treasury Secretary and they have a team, and what do they think about this and how are they going to handle it? Then there's the, U.S. Marshal Service, and I know there's a lot of opinions about that. Like, are we incentivizing, even within Bitcoin, right? We're like, are we incentivizing the U.S. government to take everybody's Bitcoin? And everybody's like, well, no, if they buy some, then they won't want to take everybody's Bitcoin. And they're like, well, they just seized a bunch now and it's going in the strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's like, well, yeah, but I think the U.S. Marshals are less likely to seize Bitcoin if they can't just market sell it and then put it in their budget and buy things with it, right? And so there's kind of that side of it, but the government, the government side of figuring that out, and then there's, I think I would call this, you'll understand what I mean by this, but the Pinesian side of it, the Matt Pines side of this, where he could come on here and talk about the national security and state power competition ideas. So now you have a whole part of the government apparatus that maybe thought about this, like in the sense of like, kind of think tank stuff, where, yeah, I read a white paper. Oh, it'd be kind of interesting to have a strategic, how's Bitcoin going to, and now it's here. And now we have a strategic Bitcoin reserve that has been established, and we're discussing doing some sort of buying program. And what is that going to do? And how are we prepared for that day? And how are other countries going to react? So it sort of opened up Pandora's box to all of these conversations no longer being theoretical, but now we actually need to have them. And so when we say that, signing that executive order sort of just like changed the playing field, or, really like flipped over the game board, well, then you have, everybody kind of has to reconstruct it and figure out, okay, we're in a new day. What does this mean for us? What does that not mean? What do we need to do? How should we, maybe they need to buy it, not tell anybody. They got to figure all that out. And that takes a ton of time. It also creates a lot of opportunity for adversaries to start to, get their footing and figure out an angle. And, maybe you supported it back then and now you don't. And so it gets very complicated very quickly. So I know that's like, I'm just trying to hit like all of the high points of the things that people like us, specifically people like, Senator Lummis, Senator Blackburn, some of those who are pushing on the Bitcoin Act, and a number of those supporters that they're working through and their staff is thinking about, and that I'm sure the administration's team's thinking about, and then you get blindsided by all this other stuff that's happening all over the world, and so it's very complicated, but I don't see how we don't get there, just because I'm trying not to mid curve it, right? I don't see how we don't get there. We have an executive order. It makes sense. Walker, you understand. We're either going to do this and be early, or we're going to miss the boat. And for BPI, our mission statement is to guide America through the rise of Bitcoin. Bitcoin's going to do its thing. We all agree on that. And I personally love our country. I hope for the best for, not just for myself and my family, but for you guys, for your families, and for my fellow countrymen. And so I think the best thing would be for us to not, be late on Bitcoin. I think it would be the best thing, for us. And I think it would do some other things as well, but we'll just stick with that one for now. And so I think the best thing that we can do, one of the best things we can do for the country writ large, would be to own some Bitcoin. And then, obviously the best thing for my countrymen, my fellow friends and family, would be, some of these other protections and guarantees that we've discussed. If I had to pick one or the other, that's an easy decision. But I don't think you just have to have one priority. I don't think you just have to like one thing. I think I'd like for all these things to happen. But anyway, yeah. I'm interested to hear what you think. I'm going to throw it back at you. What do you think about all this? What do you kind of sit back? You talk to a lot of people I know on here. You don't spend a ton of time in DC, although you have spent some time in DC.
I have spent some time. It was certainly illuminating. Gave me a lot more respect for the work that you guys do. And I'll be honest, I was initially, when I heard about a lot of the advocacy work in Washington, part of me, I had this gut reaction saying, well, you know what, Bitcoin doesn't need to care about politicians. And then I thought about it for more than 2 seconds and said, well, yeah, but the politicians care about you and they care about what you're doing. And again, I keep coming back to this very simplest, if I simplify it all down, it's I would rather have politicians that are pro-Bitcoin, pro-individual freedom, pro-freedom to transact, pro-financial privacy, than people who are anti all of that under the guise of being somehow, quote, progressive, because that's always the guise it comes under, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I think that, not to sound too simplistic, but all of this is good for Bitcoin, right? I think that, again, what we want to see, what I want to see, is America be a place with as little regulation as possible, with as little government interference as possible in the free market. We don't have a true free market because we don't have a free market for money. We have a cabal of unelected banker bureaucrats that runs the Federal Reserve that get to set the price of money. A couple hundred, PhDs on universal basic income from our tax dollars that are, paying them. And so we don't have a free market. Bitcoin gives us a free market in money for the first time. And I like that. I think that's something that's aligned with the American ethos. I think that it makes sense also. I know that given enough time, every nation state in the world is going to accumulate Bitcoin. This to me is a certainty. It's not an if, it's a when. Given that, I would rather see America lead that charge, because I believe that Western values are, despite all of the flaws that America has, are still superior to other modes of thought that we see throughout the world, right? I think that America is still one of the last bastions of true free speech and free expression, and does not have a completely totalitarian government like a lot of other places in the world do. We're very privileged to have been born here and to exist at this moment in time. Now, that said, what I think is the really difficult piece here, and I think the needle that you guys, just unfortunately have to try to thread, and I'd love to get your perspective on, is, okay, this is all well and good right now when we have an administration that is vocally pro-Bitcoin and shitcoins, crypto, right? That's all well and good. But what happens if midterms don't go the way that Trump would like to see them go? What if he becomes a lame duck president for his, the last part of his term? And then what if in 2028, maybe good old Kamala Harris comes back? I see she's talking about running again. She's got about a 5% chance, as of the poll numbers I saw, about a 5% chance in the Democratic primaries. I mean, I, for one, would love to see her run again. I would just love it for the memes. And I think that would really, if she runs again, that'll really ensure that, JD Vance probably gets elected. So I say, go ahead, Kamala, let's bring it back on, just fall out of that coconut tree and land yourself right back there in the ballot box. But my point being, let's assume that Democrats take the midterms. We know that now Bitcoin is not partisan, but it is political. It has been made to appear as partisan because a lot of people associate it with Trump. Bitcoin doesn't care about your politics, right? It's just code. It can be progressive or conservative depending on how you look at it, right? That's the beauty of Bitcoin. It's just a mirror. But we know that generally, and you guys can speak to this definitely from experience, folks on the left side of the aisle tend to be more antagonistic to Bitcoin at this time. This is just the reality of the situation, right? You guys are doing hard work to change that. It's not the rule, or it's not the overwhelming rule. There are exceptions to this, undoubtedly. A lot of great ones that should be called out in a positive way. But we know that generally they're more antagonistic. Do we see Operation Choke Point 3.0 if we get a Democratic Party president in 2028? Is Trump able to push forward any meaningful legislation and codify any meaningful legislation around Bitcoin in the last part of his term if Democrats just destroy Republicans in the midterms? I'd love your guys' thoughts on this, and how, more broadly, how do you guys try to position for that eventuality? How do you ensure that you're still able to advance policy objectives that are pro Bitcoin, pro freedom, regardless of who happens, which colored team happens to be in the White House and in Congress in power at that time?
Right. Well, I'll tell you this, Walker, if you're just now thinking about that, then it's too late. It's too damn late if a year out of the midterms, when it's starting to look spooky, we're like, how do we position for that? And I'm proud to say that, I've been at BPI. I'll brag on us a little bit, and really should brag on Grant McCarty and David Zell, because I've been here over 3 years. This will be our 4th summit, Bitcoin Policy Summit, in fall of 2026. So we've had 3 summits, and believe it or not, we have had Democratic elected officials at every single one of them. And we've had a lot more invited than showed up, but we have had some show up every time. And this is something that I remember from the very early days we prioritized. And sometimes it was hard. It was hard because, not all of them really liked us that much as an industry. They liked us as an organization, which is great because, we've never tried to play politics with it. One, we're a nonprofit and we're nonpartisan, and that's our charter. And 2, we happen to take it very seriously. And so, there's a cynical way to look at it where like, hey, we got to keep our powder dry. What if but that's not really it. I think it's just like this. I have worked on campaigns and I have been a lobbyist. And frankly, this is way more fun when you don't have to worry about all that baloney. And you can just do your job, and our job is to educate people. And obviously it's hard to do that if someone hates your guts. And so, there's that side of it. By our guts, I mean, the idea of like freedom money, or like, anything that's not, someone can, know everything about you, and use it against you whenever they want. So yeah, there are some people that really like that and think it's, cool, think that's how everything ought to be. But we have had Democratic officials at every summit. We've engaged their offices, and there's been some fantastic conversations, with these elected officials. They've supported pro-Bitcoin legislation. So anyway, I went down the rabbit hole because if the time to think about this was years ago, and we have been, as an organization. As an industry, it may be a little different story, and the story is what it is. And the industry supported candidates that supported it, and I think that's pretty normal. I think that's pretty much what everybody does. And sometimes you pay for that later, but sometimes you don't. And sometimes, I think that I don't care where you're at on the political spectrum. Well, 90% of people, if you look at elected officials, if you look at Bitcoin, you can find a reason to take it seriously and support it and think it's a great idea. So I think I will say 95%, I think, of
the Senate.
So can look at Bitcoin and say, yeah, I think this aligns with my worldview. This aligns with my policy with my priorities. And so I'm convinced that whether you're a Democrat or Republican, you know, you can look at Bitcoin, you can look at this industry and say, yeah, this makes sense. These guys need to, you know, not be thrown in prison for XYZ. That, you know, we should have developer protections. We should help people to be able to, you know, spend, you know, money on Bitcoin, on coffee, or like do whatever, and should be taxed for that. That's stupid. You know, I think there's just some common sense things. Now, some of these may, you know, Trump signed the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And so I think you're a little, you may be, you know, to get, you know, 60 senators, you know, and 50 of them are Democrats to establish that, like, right now might be a little hard politically, you know, to just gift the, you know, the current administration some. But, you know, I think even with that, if you kind of dig into the details and you look, like, I think there's a lot of Democrats who would support that and do support that. And I think there's more that ultimately will. It just depends, you know, how soon and how long it kind of takes them to get over, you know, if there's sort of the kind of vengeful stuff. And so I expect more of that. I think it's always good to have high expectations of people, of your elected officials, your representatives in Congress. I refuse to get like overly cynical, because I think, you know, I think having high expectations is necessary in order, you know, for a lot of people to meet them. If you expect nothing of someone, and you know, a lot of times they'll live up to that. And so I'm hopeful but I'm also like, you know, I'm not really caught off guard when it doesn't go that way, if that makes sense. So, and it's felt like a non-answer, but I'm trying to kind of paint the, kind of
You know,
frame
it's you're working with politicians, so I expect the answers to be a little bit roundabout. They've got to rub off on you a little bit. You know, this is only natural, Stephen. It's only natural.
Yeah.
Walker,
Zach, anything you want to throw on top
go,
of that?
Zach.
Yeah, just 2 quick points. One, I think something that we're going to see play out. I don't know the sort of time frame here, but one of my major predictions is that the cost to being anti-Bitcoin, and Bitcoin in particular, is just going to go through the roof in the coming years. And I think Trump's election was the early evidence of that. I don't think it was sort of conclusive, you know, against the Kamala Harris campaign. But I think in retrospect, the sort of evidence of like how influential our industry and our, you know, the Bitcoin supporters, who you know, went out and voted in this past election, I think it will be really, really interesting to see what happens in the midterms with that, and to see if, you know, Democrats come out and say, hey, you know, I understand that most Democrats, they think like, you know, this is like Trump's pet problem, and, you know, I don't want to get involved with that because I don't want to, you know, no guilt by association. I'm honestly would not be surprised if we saw a bunch of Democrats come out and say, hey, you know, I'm for this industry. You know, we need to make America a place where like crypto, you know, writ large is welcomed. And as part of that, Bitcoin is too. You know, so that's major prediction number one. And I think it'll be really interesting to see, you know, how that plays out in the midterms, and probably ending up in the 2028, you know, presidential election. And then the other piece that, you know, I think is important to remember is that, you know, BPI for 3 years of its existence was under a extremely hostile Biden administration. And, you know, there are a number of examples of things that obviously we, you know, we're very unhappy to see. That was the prosecutions of, you know, Samurai Wallet, Tornado Cash. You know, that was all at the hands of the Biden administration, Choke Point 2.0. But the industry also, you know, grew massively, and we, you know, we've thrived, you know, during that time, as much as, you know, we were kind of up against it politically. And so I think even to the extent that we see something like that, I honestly expect us still to make, you know, forward progress.
I love the optimism there, and I couldn't agree more. And Stephen, I know you've got to head out here. Maybe want to just give you an opportunity, if there's anything you want to wrap up with, any plug for BPI, especially for folks maybe who want to get involved, or things to pay attention to that you guys will have coming up here on the calendar.
Yeah, appreciate it. Thanks for having me on and having us on. And wish I could sit here for 2 more hours. We should do it more often. But yeah, I think, I'm looking back right now at the last year. I mean, it's hard to even describe the year that just how the landscape has shifted in DC and with regards to Bitcoin and policy. And with BPI, I mean, it was a landmark year. I could go on for 20 minutes about everything. And we've just been very blessed this year. So many people have been generous and helpful. And then just we've seen so much favor in DC with elected officials and, the vice president shouting us out and Treasury Secretary coming to the grand opening of our office like a month ago, and just wild things. There's so you can't even, it's just unimaginable, unfathomable. We launched a congressional fellowship program, which is the first of its kind. It's going to be really, really cool and just like helpful for everything we were talking about today. Strategic Bitcoin Reserve, having like 1,000 people at a Bitcoin policy summit, which a few years ago just seemed like, if you go back in time. And so some of those, just as an organization, really stepping into its own. And so, and what I want to say is that, and this isn't marketing, this is just true, that the things that I know are on the horizon for 2026 really, I think, blow last year out of the water, 2025. And so, I mean, it's going to be a big year, and I can't, I'm going to get all the specifics, but there are some, I'm really excited. And honestly, it's warp speed. And so I just want to appreciate, I appreciate people like you, and people listening. It probably sounds like something you do, but I really mean it. Like Walker and your wife. I mean, you guys, just supporting us and believing in the people like us who are doing the work we're doing. Understand the cynicism, that you kind of talked about, skepticism, I should say, maybe both, with Bitcoin and policy work. And I've just seen a lot of people over the last few years kind of say, yeah, you guys put a lot of trust and into us and others who are doing this type of work, because it really does go against the grain of, of some of the things that, the way you would normally think about it. I'll put it that way. And so, I'm just trying to say thank you. I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Well, and I'll just say you're welcome.
And people who who kind of get behind us, and then there's a ton of people who do that financially too, which we appreciate, and we couldn't do it without. But I'm thinking more about just the vibes, and it's great to have that community support, especially with the Bitcoin and Bitcoin network. So thanks for having us on. Love chatting about this stuff, and really excited for 2026. So we'll have plenty to talk about, I'm sure.
Good deal. Well, Stephen, thanks so much for joining. We're going to go to a quick commercial break, and do encourage everybody to check out the great work that the Bitcoin Policy Institute is doing. Again, somebody's got to be there in the swamp, walking through in their mud boots, trying to get things done. Appreciate that you guys are doing it, and with a Bitcoin only perspective, because I think that's very much needed. So thank you guys. Appreciate it very much. Again, we're going to run to a quick commercial break, and then we will be right back. Don't touch that dial.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy. Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank, the only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to Roxham TV. My name is Walker America. I am here with Zach Cohen from the Bitcoin Policy Institute. We've been talking all things Bitcoin and Bitcoin policy, and we have Zach for just a little bit more time here. So one thing I wanted to finish up with is to maybe talk a little bit about the Bitcoin for America Act. Zach, can you break down a little bit kind of what this is? It's officially the Bitcoin for America Act, HR 6180, introduced by Warren Davidson. And it was just introduced, I think, in November of this year. But can you give a little bit of your take on it, how you guys are looking at it at BPI, and kind of what it means for the average American?
Yeah. First of all, Congressman Warren Davidson is a total Bitcoin pleb. Like, he's a Bitcoin maxi. He gets the thing. We recorded an interview with him the day, I guess it was the day before the bill, got publicly announced. And him and Connor Brown, who's new on our team, they sat down in the Rumble studio, and he goes, look, this bill, obviously you can, I'll get into this a little bit more. You can pay your taxes in Bitcoin, but look, if you don't want to give your Bitcoin to the government, like, I get that, heard, like, you do you. You don't have to. But like, just the thought process of like, hey, there's a bunch of Bitcoiners out there who are like, hey, I'm not giving my Bitcoin to the government. Like, no way, no, not gonna happen. And so he gets it. And he's been really great on this issue for a while. But the Bitcoin for America Act is a new piece of legislation, sometime in November. I guess it was kind of mid-November. Congressman Warren Davidson introduced this piece of legislation in the House of Representatives. And broadly speaking, it allows Americans to pay their taxes in Bitcoin. And the amount that you pay your taxes in, all of that Bitcoin becomes exempt from capital gains. And so basically it's this sort of very virtuous mechanism for the US government to stack Bitcoin, where anyone who wants to contribute their Bitcoin to the United States, and key detail here, whatever Bitcoin is pledged to pay taxes will be held in the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve for 20 years. And so this would also be the piece of legislation that could codify the Strategic Bitcoin Reserve into legislation. So that's a key element here. But basically, when an American pays their taxes in Bitcoin, capital gains, go bye-bye. And that basically is this very virtuous cycle of funding the strategic Bitcoin reserve. It's this very kind of democratic solution to buying Bitcoin, where if you're somebody who says, hey, I'm morally opposed to Bitcoin, I hate Bitcoin, my grandma, she got scammed and I hate it, and I'm never going to use it. You don't have to, you don't have to contribute any of your Bitcoin to the strategic Bitcoin reserve. If you're like, hey, I don't want America to own any Bitcoin, like, the solution is to just not contribute any Bitcoin to the strategic Bitcoin reserve. And so it's this very kind of novel piece of policy that we were incredibly proud to have worked with Warren Davidson on directly and have endorsed publicly, which is, again, as a 501c3 nonprofit think tank, that's not something we do very often. We don't, we have not come out and said, hey, we're endorsing, the Clarity Act, or we did do it with the strategic Bitcoin reserve, but not quite in this directive of fashion. And so, for us at BPI, this is just, no nonsense policy. It's extremely democratic. If you want to contribute your Bitcoin, you can. You'll get a little incentive for that. If you don't want to, you don't have to. And it's just a really clean way to also establish the strategic Bitcoin reserve, because for those who aren't super familiar, the Bitcoin Act, which was the original piece of legislation introduced by Senator Cynthia Lummis, that basically requires us to revalue America's gold certificates. And that's a whole political thing, right? There's a lot wrapped up in that. And that would be a major piece of legislation if it were to happen. This is a little bit of a, kind of shortcut to establishing the strategic Bitcoin reserve, in law, a statutory strategic Bitcoin reserve, and then starting to kind of incrementally fund it over time. And Walker, am I able to share my screen? Because we've got a great resource for folks.
Yes, you should be able to go ahead and go right down to that tray down at the bottom there.
So we worked with a great gentleman by the name of Rohan Harani. He is the founder of Bitcoin Quant, which is a fantastic website, but we'll leave that to the side for now. But he worked with us to develop this incredible model to basically map out if some percent of Americans contribute X percent of their annual taxes in Bitcoin over some period, from point A to point B, and they contribute their income tax versus their capital gains tax, across the board. How does that impact America's basically fiscal position? And so we have all these great sliders here. You can program this to the assumptions you think are right. And then you can see how that plays out over time. And so really fantastic model. The main reason for this is that folks in Washington, they want to see what these policy proposals look like in practice. And this allows us to basically put the numbers in front of people, say, hey, if only 2% of Americans pay their taxes in Bitcoin, and we hold that for 20 years, that's a $25.4 trillion gain in our position. And that's, as it stands right now, some meaningful portion of the national debt. And so really excited about this. We definitely encourage people to go and play with this. It's on our website at btcpolicy.org under the policy dropdown. And massive shout out to Rohan who put this together in pretty short order for us. But these are the kinds of things where we put pretty no nonsense piece of legislation in the hands of folks in Congress, and they say, hey, this makes perfect sense. This is an easy kind of win for us. It will be really interesting from my perspective to see whether this catches some steam coming into the new year. So really excited about that. Thanks for letting me share that.
Absolutely. And yeah, I really appreciate all the work that you guys are doing over there. I know you've got to get going here. We've got our next guest as well ready to jump in, but just want to thank you again for the work that you guys do at BPI. Anything else you want to direct people towards just before you head out?
Yeah, well, first of all, I appreciate you having me. We'll definitely do this again. I know Steven was pretty psyched about jumping on here too. It is the end of the year. BPI is a 501c3 nonprofit. If you are looking to make a contribution, that goes, a really, really long way for us. We are, entirely community supported. So yeah, visit our website, btcpolicy.org. We've got, Twitter, LinkedIn, YouTube. Make sure you're subscribed in all those places. And yeah, just kind of, hearing from the community on all these things. Like, hey, we think the de minimis exemption is the number one thing that, us as a community really wants. Like we want to hear that. We want to translate that. And so, yeah, kind of keep up with what we're doing and let us know how we're doing.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Zach. Appreciate yours and Steven's time. And yeah, good luck out there in the swamp. Looking forward to going to the Bitcoin Policy Summit again in 2026. It was certainly an enlightening experience for me. And I go back with a renewed attitude as to how to approach some of these conversations. So appreciate you guys and all the work that you're doing. Take care, man.
Take care. Thanks so much, Walker.
All right. So guys, we're going to now bring up to the stage here. We've got for about the next hour, we've got Nathan from Bitcoin Mentor. I'm going to bring him up on the stage here. Nathan, again, runs the Bitcoin Mentor. It's one of the channels that is associated with BTC Sessions. They do some great work over there as far as Bitcoin education. Nathan, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty good, Walker. I was just coming in at the tail there and hearing some talk of no cap gains on Bitcoin. And my God, do I love that. We don't need a lot from the team. We just need you to get out of the way, please and thank you. That's all that we need to accomplish and to win this battle.
Exactly. I mean, it's really, the best government is the one which governs least, I think. I just want my government to be as small as possible and barely noticeable. I don't think that's asking too much. But Nathan, I'm glad you're able to join here. It's it's an interesting day. I've got a couple of different things I want to dig into with you. One of the things that I started off this broadcast with was talking about Donald Trump, his recent kind of mentions of the Samourai case. It was brought to his attention during a press briefing. I think this is fantastic news for anybody who's been following this case. It is one that I think should energize and engage every Bitcoiner, because this is really just fundamental to kind of the precedent we set going forward. I'd love kind of your read on this. Obviously, it's December 16th right now. As of December 19th, Keone Rodriguez is set to report to federal prison to begin his 5-year term. Bill set to report federal prison shortly after that. How are you reading this right now? Are you feeling fairly hopeful given President Trump's apparent now knowledge of this case? What's your vibe check on this?
I'm extremely hopeful about it. For him to actually comment on it, I mean, he could be just directly answering the question and just kind of keeping that in his mind, but he did use Keone's last name as well, too. Like, he did say Rodriguez back to him, which if it was the first time him hearing it, I doubt that he would necessarily have that at the tip of his tongue. I kind of suspect that he's maybe been briefed on this already, or somebody has pointed out to him. Someone sent an email, somebody made a call. In terms of vibes about it, this is the perfect opportunity, which, guys, it's funny because some people are unbelievably easy to play if you know how, and Trump is not a difficult person to know how to play. This would be a good time, like, for anyone that's tweeting at him or going on Truth Social or talking about him, start praising him for how much of an amazing person he would be if he were to do not only Ross Ulbricht, but get the Samourai devs, Bill and Keone, out of there as well too. His ego is the easiest thing in the world to stroke, and he tends to be, any of his critics will come out very harshly. Any of his supporters, he tends to try and raise them up. And you'll see him do that flip too. I never forgot Little Rocket Man with North Korea, that as soon as you do what he wants, he'll just, oh, he's awesome. He's doing the great things. He's going to turn things around, right? He's got that. He loves to be the center of attention. He loves to be loved. So play into it, guys. Now is the exact time to continue hammering him, to keep making noise on this. Don't shut up about it, and let him know how great you think he'll be if he pulls this off, if he actually does that. Yeah, screw those Dems. Let's go into the midterms with a win. Just sing his praises to the high heaven. I don't care if it makes you throw up in your mouth a little bit. Just do it. You're going to be able to push this one across the finish line, and I'm optimistic that we can. And speaking about the vibes, I mean, there's something that I was thinking about last night, and I'm having a really hard time articulating it, but I'll play around with the idea with you and the audience here too, is that there's a very beautiful silver lining about the situation that's going on with Keone and Bill, with the Samourai devs, in terms of it's brought out the best in the Bitcoin community, 110%. Everyone is just rallying to this, and you're seeing that everyone's getting on point, getting on mission. They're not stopped. They're retweeting everything. They're constantly commenting it. They're throwing in every comment section. It's all I see in my feed, and that's absolutely wonderful. And I think as a community, like, we almost need that, right? We need to be mission aligned, and I think that was something that was actually kind of lacking over the last year or so, that this tragedy, this travesty in front of us has reminded us why we're here, and kind of reinvigorated that savage, that toxic Bitcoiner spirit to get out there to make change and make things happen. Because it's not that Bitcoin is unstoppable. It's Bitcoiners with Bitcoin are unstoppable. That ultimately it comes down to us, and we need a mission. We need something to push forward. And let me see if I can tease this idea apart, because I saw the videos in the comments from Luke Groman. Now, don't get me wrong, I really like Luke Groman. I've interviewed him. I think he's a fantastic guy. I think he's very insightful, and I was shocked to see that he's kind of tapering back his Bitcoin position and calling for 40K. I don't agree, but it felt very much like it's like, okay, so you get sound money, but we're still kind of a tourist here. And I don't begrudge him. He's got a newsletter and a ton of stuff on his plate. We don't all necessarily have time to do our 40 hours per week. You should do your 40 hours per week, but doesn't mean that you necessarily can. And it kind of felt like there wasn't really any Bitcoin adoption over the last year. Like looking at somebody like Luke, and for him to go like, oh, I think it's going to correct, and so I'm going to pull out for now. Maybe I'll come back later looking at 40K. It's like, that doesn't feel like Bitcoin adoption. That feels like fiat games that involve Bitcoin. And I think it's this spirit that we're seeing right now rallying in defense of the Samourai devs. That's Bitcoin adoption. Those are people that have adopted Bitcoin. They've realized the power of it, but they've also realized their own power and the importance that they have on the world, and they're going after it. So my vibes are unbelievably bullish. Maybe not even necessarily in terms of price, but seeing the community just get ignited like this has really put the wind in my sails. And I almost want to like make sure that, one, we win this mission and we go on to the next one quickly too. That we find whatever the next target is, the next thing that we have to get behind, that we do not stop. We do not go back into this complacency, go back into this kind of like tourist mode, price go up mode, right? I love what I'm seeing, and I'm very optimistic that we can win. That was a long rant. What do you got for me, Walker?
I love it. And I think that this is actually a really important part of this vibe check, is that right now, you may see Bitcoin's price, again, chop soliding around. We're currently sitting at 87,621 infinitely printable US petrodollars per Bitcoin. But the vibes have shifted now. Now with more of this attention put on the Samourai case, the vibes that I see from Bitcoiners in general are less focused on price. Because again, I forget who said it first, but price is the least interesting thing about Bitcoin, right? Yeah. Now, price is also what brings in a lot of people. The number go up leads to more people joining the network, which leads to the freedom go up. It is a virtuous cycle, right? People pay attention to that. It is what brings in new entrants. They don't come now, though. They come when Bitcoin is, a rocket ship again, of course. But the point being, I think what you've said is really spot on, and it's an astute observation, is that Bitcoiners and the Bitcoin, let's say, community and ecosystem at large is at its strongest, its most powerful and energetic when there's something to rally behind, something to rally against, something to fight for. And right now, this is a narrative that I think has captured, like, this is the zeitgeist right now, is, you know what? Like, and for someone like myself who was not really advocating as loudly as I should have been for as long as I could, it's like going to do whatever I can right now to use the platform that I have to be able to speak about this, because I think that this case, the Samourai wallet case with Bill and Keone, I think that it's so important. And I'll just pause quickly to say, go to billandkeone.org and please do sign the petition, donate if you are able, share it. That's free. That doesn't cost you a thing. But this is a really, I think, defining moment, because what happens right now, first of all, people may say, well, you're out here bootlicking politicians or begging Trump for a pardon, these things. And it's like, first of all, nobody's bootlicking anyone. We are talking about two men's lives, though, and not just their lives, but their families' lives. Yep. And the fact that if you look at the reality of this case, you look at how this case was prosecuted, I don't think anybody can look at this. No reasonable person can look at this, unless you're a prosecutor at the Southern District of New York. You cannot look at this and say that justice was served. Again, I'll beat the drum on this again for folks that weren't around at the start of this broadcast, because it was a couple hours ago. So I'll say it again. FinCEN, the Treasury Bureau regulator in charge of money transmitter rules, said when approached by the prosecution prior to an indictment being brought, they said, nope, these guys are not money transmitters because they do not have custody of user funds at any time. So again, FinCEN, the ones in charge of this, the ones who say who's a money transmitter and who's not, said they're not a money transmitter. That was hidden for almost a year from the defense, from Keone and Bill, in clear violation of the Brady Act. This was exculpatory evidence that should have been brought up immediately. The judge was switched partway through the trial. There's so much funny business that went on here. 50 FBI agents in an armored vehicle being sent to Keone's house where he and his wife live, and to arrest a software developer. Like this, they're gearing up like they were going to stamp out those illegal gun owners at Ruby Ridge, right? This is just absolutely insane. It's a miscarriage of justice. and also just a gross misuse of taxpayer dollars. How much taxpayer money was wasted on this, just on that raid alone? A ton of money, and all the prosecution's efforts. So much taxpayer money wasted on something that should have been dismissed. It should never have been even brought this far, but it was. And now we're at a point where Bitcoiners have the opportunity to make their voices heard. This is something that is going to set either a dangerous precedent or a very good one going forward. The dangerous precedent is if these guys go in, they do not deserve to spend any time in jail, right? They do not deserve any jail time. This was a miscarriage of justice. They should be pardoned, in my opinion. I think that Donald Trump, as somebody who has also been personally attacked by the Southern District of New York, he should know very well that there's maybe some alleged, because I don't want to get sued for defamation, some alleged funny business going on there. Something doesn't smell right. Something is a little bit rotten. And so I think right now is the moment where Bitcoiners need to rally together. They need to say, enough is enough. We're going to stand by these open source Bitcoin developers who wrote code. And yes, that code can be used by criminals, right? They never took custody of criminals' funds. Bitcoin can be used by criminals. The US dollar is used by criminals all the time. It's
made
used
by
by criminals. It's counterfeited. It's unconstitutional that the Federal Reserve even exists, but that's a different story, right? We don't need to get into that. But for right now, I would say it is absolutely ridiculous that not a single big banker spends any time in jail and instead pays hundreds of millions or billions of dollars in fines as a cost of doing business when they actually launder money for and take custody of that money for Jeffrey Epstein, drug cartels, international criminals, child traffickers. This is just insane. And instead of those guys actually facing any sort of repercussions for that, they pay a fine, keep doing business, keep laundering money for criminals. Meanwhile, 2 open source developers are scheduled to be taken away from their families and put in federal prison when they never took custody of funds. So there's my rant. It's something that I think should fire you up. If you're not fired up about this, if you're not angry about this, you're not paying attention, is my opinion. And we all really need to make sure we stay active, stay engaged, and do whatever we can to make it known that, Samourai deserves a pardon.
Completely agree. And it's funny too, because you're absolutely right. It wasn't even a case of ignorance of the law, they didn't know what they're doing was illegal. It very clearly wasn't, at least in any reasonable interpretation of it. They had a lawyer, they had a legal team, and they had FinCEN, and everyone's like, yeah, you're in the clear. The rules are clearly written. It's anarcho-tyranny, right? It's being used to send a message that if you were trying to enable people to empower themselves to be able to transact financially, to send value privately, that is a major threat to the system. And it is a major threat to the system. And it's funny. It goes back to the vibes and everything that we're seeing here and why it's so important. Because you're right, it's important that we rally together here. I had a conversation with Jack Cruz and Simon Dixon. This information, this came up a lot. And from their perspective, that privacy is definitely the next thing that is under attack and suspects that it's only going to get worse. I've already had comments from people reach out regarding kind of hesitation to use the tools now at this point in time, right? It is working as a chilling effect to move people to okay, maybe I should just centralize all the Bitcoin, or maybe I shouldn't get involved with this, or maybe I'll get in trouble for this. It's the same thing we had with even the kind of culture war where you were so afraid to speak out on social media or speak publicly for fear of backlash or going after your job or being canceled. You were afraid of the mob. Terrorism, even this kind of intimidation tactics, they absolutely work. We can't let this be. And with regards to the bootlicking comment there, there's an important designation. It is not, in my strong opinion, it is not immoral to lie. I'll give you a classic example. Let's say Bitcoiners are completely enemy number one of the state, and I have a Bitcoin, path to freedom hidden in the sovereign province of Alberta, and I'm hiding Walker and Carla and Canute and all our friends from down south in my basement. Someone comes knocking on the door asking if I have Bitcoiners there. I'm going to say, no, fuck off. I don't have any Bitcoiners. Get away from me, right? You do not have a moral obligation to share the truth with everybody, right? It's more of a reciprocal relationship. And to that same vein, yes, if you want to lie to Trump and praise him and say that he's great in order for us to get our basically POWs back and not have these innocent men go to jail, then do it, man. That's a low cost. I know that you're lying. You know that you're lying. We have no issues here. It's not like I'm going to put that on your Christmas card next year being like, here, I hear you like Trump. No, of course not. We're here on a mission. We're here to get something done. And to that rallying point, one of the things that I had come out from the recent conversation with those 2 fine gentlemen was this idea of pitting people against each other. Now, people might not necessarily know this, but Walker, when it comes to op returns and spam on chain and censorship, you and I have a bit of a difference of opinion. I know, shocking. We don't fully agree or just have one cohesive thought on the topic, but it doesn't fucking matter because we're still friends and we're still here for a bigger mission. And I can't prove this, but I very much even if it wasn't the intent, that whole saga that's still going on, which we still should have fierce in public debate about the best ways moving forward, that is how we like progress and improve things. It feels very much like a divide and conquer technique right now, because the most powerful thing, again, is Bitcoiners who understand privacy tech, who understand sovereign computing, they understand what's going on behind the scenes, and they know how to use Bitcoin. So if you want to take people out, if you want to defang Bitcoiners in the Bitcoin community, you have them fight amongst themselves, Walker. That's the most obvious thing, to distract them, to discredit each other, to tear each other down. And that's why I think that, like, it's so beautiful in this moment that that's kind of been pushed to the sides, where I think absolutely it should be right now. It's not priority number one. We got things that are important and things that are urgent. That is important, but I wouldn't put it in the urgent category right now. This takes precedent. So throw down your arms, link up with your brothers. We've got bigger fish to fry. We'll fight about all that shit till the sun comes home, right? If the cows come home. Sorry, I got a whole bunch of mixing metaphors here. But we need to remember that even if, like terrible libertarians, that even if we'll fight so vehemently about the smallest things, but don't lose sight of the broader mission, that we are all still brothers in Bitcoin. We still have a huge mission and a huge battle ahead of us, particularly when it comes to holding our own keys, acting in a self-sovereign way, having privacy. We got to start pushing as one, which is so counterintuitive for a decentralized network of plebs and nodes all over the world. We actually do, to some degree, at least have to, at times, whether organically or inorganically, coordinate and push on this. And so this right now is a bit of both, because we're here right now telling you that's what you have to do. And if not for them, do it for yourself, because you're going to need this technology. You're going to need those devs, and you're not going to want to, like, how many people out there might have a brilliant idea for ways to improve security or privacy for Bitcoin? They now think to themselves, I don't want to get caught up in that machine. I don't want to be the next dev that goes to prison because I accidentally created tech that worked, right? If you could completely, like, just imagine if you had something that was so seamless and so easy and it just anonymized all transactions while still being able to audit everything on chain, that it just gave it added the privacy that we have to sacrifice in order to have the supply cap and the known supply on chain. We fully dealt with that issue. We became unstoppable. Well, that's a real threat to the state and to the money printers and to the tax collectors, right? They're not going to let that go easy. At the very least, we have to have the message be known and clear that if you go out there and you build tools for freedom, we've got your back, if nothing else. And if that means licking a boot or two to say Trump's a nice guy or whatever it might be, of course we'll do it. If that means putting aside our differences so we can rally together, it means of course we'll do it. That if because I can't do it. I kept thinking about it. I didn't want to make it about myself, but when we had Keone on the stream, the thing that I had in the back of my mind was that I didn't have the tech skills to do that, but I totally would have. Both him and Ross, right? If I would have had the ability to program to build something like that and it didn't already exist, I totally would have done the exact same thing that they would have done, which means I could have easily been in that situation. I think there's a lot of us that don't necessarily have the skill set, but totally would have done that. And so if we can't build the tools, at the very least, we got to let the tool builders know we've got your back.
I say amen to that. And again, it's I view it as the live stream hosts, the podcasters, the influencers. We are the shield. The open source developers are the tip of the spear, and the shield is there to make sure that the tip of the spear can still thrust deeply, right, and can still penetrate its target of freedom. But we are there to make sure that there is some cover for them. We do need to run to a quick commercial break. But then we're going to be right back. I want to continue checking the vibes here, talking a little bit about some of the more broad, let's say, narratives that we have within the space right now, but still keeping this central theme around the Samourai wallet case, because I do think it is the most important case, most kind of important thing to focus on in Bitcoin right now is making sure these guys do not spend a day in federal prison and do in fact receive a pardon. We're going to talk about all that and more, because again, the NGU leads to the FGU. Number go up, to the freedom go up. We'll be right back. Stay tuned.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to Roxham TV. My name is Walker America. I am here with Nathan from Bitcoin Mentor. We are talking about the Samourai wallet case and the need to pardon Bill and Keone, the Samourai wallet developers. Nathan, you know, as we're talking about this, it's kind of funny. The narrative this year, more broadly, I think, has been really around these Bitcoin treasury companies. Now, I don't mean my personal narrative. I don't mean what I want the narrative to be. I mean, what is actually the narrative that has been kind of dominant? And I think it really has been around the proliferation and, you know, the run up and then massive run down of a lot of these Bitcoin treasury companies. It's been a lot of the focus on that store of value, on that kind of, let's say, corporate Bitcoin. And I can't help but you know, think of the contrast between that and exactly what the narrative is around the Samourai wallet case. It's the antithesis of that, really. We're talking about anti-corporate Bitcoin, anti-state Bitcoin, private Bitcoin, and open source developers who are basically, you know, not even flying in the face of the law, or actually respecting the law, or not doing anything illegal, but are in fact still hit with the long arm of the law and the big heavy fist of the law. And I'm just wondering, I mean, do you think that we've been a bit distracted, let's say, as an ecosystem, as an industry? I mean, there's also different pockets of this industry, right? But you know, you don't see a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies advocating for the pardoning of Samourai, right? You don't see a lot of that. Maybe there is. Maybe I just haven't seen it. So I'm not, you know, not calling out anyone specifically. Just saying that hasn't been something that, you know, no treasury company is running billboards saying pardon Samourai, for example.
No, I completely agree. Have we been distracted? Yeah, absolutely. It's been a complete distraction. And unfortunately, I think it's actually taken back Bitcoin adoption in the self-sovereign, self-custody sort of way. It's taken it down a notch or two. It's one of the unfortunate things that nothing blew up, right? We'd have it at Quadriga CX or an FTX. No one's relearned those lessons. But I'm more and more resolved to the idea that, like, I know, I'm well aware, and I'm sure the chat will give me shit. I'm well aware that it's like a no true Scotsman fallacy, but there's no Bitcoiner that is at least only in Bitcoin treasury companies. That's not a thing, right? Because that goes directly into reintroducing trust and cost and friction to a trustless, self-sovereign, send it anytime you like money. It doesn't make sense unless you're clearly looking at this as a means of trying to get more fiat. And I'm you know, I'll choose my words carefully. I'm not looking for anyone to be just like with the shitcoins, right? I don't want anyone to lose their life savings. I don't want their financial life to be ruined, but I do want this to be washed out. I think it was a fun fad, and paper Bitcoin summer was all the rage, but I think it has to go by the wayside, just like the ICO craze of 2017. It's these narratives are going to pop up. These things are going to happen. We're going to have those moments where we're winning, and you kind of see like the fiat games come back into play because everyone gets so excited about the price action. And again, I mean, I always kind of thought we're kind of seeing both things at play. It's almost like the two sides of taking down Bitcoin. Because again, to take down Bitcoin would be it's just a store of value, right? If it's just something that's locked up in a 401k or whatever retirement vehicle it might be, so that you can collect more of these infinitely printable petrodollar cuckbucks, then that's not the point. That's not what we're here to do. We're actually here to fix the money, fix the world, and it's us that actually go out and make those changes. I always assumed that the fear hammer was going to be the one that they targeted Bitcoins with the most. And that's what they're doing right now with the Samourai devs, right? And it's nice to see the community respond to that. They're aware. The problem with using something like force against these guys, ruining their financial lives, ruining their lives, taking away years of their life, separating them from their family. The problem that, again, if let's just assume that there are bad actors that are targeting Bitcoin, or realize that it is a threat to their monopoly on violence or their ability, their scenerage, their ability to print money. Let's assume for a second that they see Bitcoin as a threat. If they come at us with a hammer, you see what the community does, right? Look how quickly we rallied. We, again, going back to like we joined Phalanx. We're all pushing in one direction, and we've got it to the president. We did get it that far. It actually made it that far in a relatively short period of time. We got thousands of signatures on the petition. We need thousands more. So again, if you signed it, share it with somebody else. Share it with 3 people. We'll do the what is it? That the movie with the little kid who used to be child actor?
Pay it forward.
Thank you. We'll pay it forward. Let's pay it forward. Take that link right now, share it with 3 people, and tell them that if they go ahead and they sign it, you'll consider getting them something really nice for Christmas. And again, happy holidays. Merry Christmas, everybody. Glad to see that's coming up. When they come at us with force, like they did with Ross, like they're doing now with Samourai wallets, we're all very attuned to that. We expect that. We know how to react, and we do so, right? The other threat, I don't want to say necessarily a bigger threat, which you kind of hinted at with the Bitcoin treasury, at least I'm hinting at the Bitcoin treasuries, is that when they come at us, instead of with fear, with greed, our defenses go down, right? It's very nice to feel like we're right. It's very nice to be like, ooh, I could buy a little more ribeye this month than I could last month. That's a lot of fun. And I want to see this energy continue to call out those greed motivated attacks and distractions as well too. Will there be companies that have Bitcoin treasuries? You're absolutely sure they will be. I was going to swear, but I was like, pull back a notch. Yes, there will be many Bitcoin companies that have Bitcoin treasuries, but this idea that you could just park it on your balance sheet and that's going to be what then that's the whole model of the business. I think MicroStrategy is a one-off, being a first mover, and they've really dominated that position, and they will reside there for quite a while as long as they can continue to issue credit. But you see that their credit rating and their access to these things and getting blocked from index funds and stuff as well. I think that the system is wise to their game and doesn't want to give them the ability to continue to access cheap credit. I think that's ultimately why Saylor pulled the 1.44 billion in cash. I don't think he's really doing it for operating expenses. That to me doesn't make sense. Because even from the Bitcoin perspective, it's like, okay, I could have my spending Bitcoin account and my savings a Bitcoin account. I bought more Bitcoin. Just guys know for the purposes, this is for managing our daily expenses and our overhead. It's like, you just convert it as you need it and go. There's no reason it has to sit in dollars. I think that's purely trying to position themselves in more favorable light for the fiat creditors to try and be able to continue to raise capital. I think that'll eventually run out. And I think they're a one-off. But going back more specifically to the original question, I don't think there will be Bitcoin treasury companies. I hate to say it, but I think Naka's down like 99% or something I saw recently. Like that's quite a haircut there, guys. Because at the end of the day, if you're investing in equity, what you have is a share of the company, and it could get sold off for parts. It needs to be a value-producing company. It's the same. It's so funny how I had a conversation with a client earlier today, how much Bitcoin just simplifies everything. And she was kind of asking about investments and these things too. And I don't do Bitcoin investment advice, but I'll share my opinion. I'll share what I do personally. Bitcoin simplifies my life so much because I don't invest in anything. I just try to work really hard. And when there's extra, I leave it in Bitcoin. And that's it. That's all I have to worry about. But that same premise applies to companies, right? It's not even for them going to be an investment strategy. It's just focus on your business. The same rules apply to individuals as they do to groups. So in these group settings that we call a corporation or a business, you're going to have to provide more value than you spend and then just save the excess in Bitcoin. That's it. So I think it was a huge distraction. I think it brought a lot of tourists, which again is where my motivation, where my I would just say that's where my heart is into this, is from the freedom side. Again, I came in not necessarily, I came in from the Austrian libertarian kind of camp beforehand. I really do want to see a more peaceful, voluntary world, and I think that that's where the energy and the mission is coalescing around right now around the Samurai dev. So yes, I think that's a long way of saying yes. I could have just said yes. The Treasury were a distraction. I think they brought a lot of tourists. I think it's very possible we see an even larger price correction because you'll see tourists leave. Because you wouldn't have conviction in this if you don't understand what it's really trying to serve, what the underlying mission is, what it's trying to accomplish. It would be probably very scary for you if you're just looking at this as another investment vehicle and you're comparing it to the Mag 7. I totally get that. And again, I don't begrudge. I don't want anyone to lose their life savings or to get wiped out here. But I would like to see you take what you have right now and convert it into self-custody Bitcoin. I think that would be the best strategy, not financial advice, but the best way to go. So yeah, I think the treasury companies, I'm not saying that they were an attack on Bitcoin, but they're kind of sometimes indistinguishable from an attack on Bitcoin.
So I'll take, and I hear the point there. I'll take the I'll take the opposing view just for the sake of argument as well. The treasury companies, regardless of what we think of them, they're natural. And you made a point, you don't think that treasury companies will necessarily be kind of around forever. I would say that maybe most treasury companies, as they're conceived of today, are not going to be around forever. But in the future, every company will be a treasury company because it will hold Bitcoin on its balance sheet because that is the prudent thing to do. Now, whether or not those companies are demanding a large premium from investors based on their ability to acquire more Bitcoin, trading at multiples, high multiples, that's a different story. I think strategy is going to be one that is obviously they're the biggest kid at the playground, right? Like just sharing this right now. As of yesterday, Saylor announced Strategy's acquired 10,645 BTC for 980 million at $92,098 per Bitcoin, has achieved a BTC yield of 24.9% year to date 2025. As of the 14th of December, they hodl 671,268 Bitcoin, acquired for 50.33 billion at $74,972 per Bitcoin, which is just a staggering amount of Bitcoin. Nobody's going to catch them.
No.
This is just the reality of the situation. And looking, they also, Strategy shared this chart as well. 3.2% of all Bitcoin ever to be in existence. This is just showing Strategy's acquired additional Bitcoin in every quarter since Q3 2020. 90 different acquisitions. You can see here the chart. It's really quite staggering to see how much Bitcoin acquired. And there is just nobody who is going to be able to come in and acquire that much size. The companies that would be able to acquire that much size are far too big and far too slow moving. And by the time they actually do start doing it, Strategy's holdings will be, worth however many multiples of this, right? And I mean, Strategy is even kind of eclipsing some nation states here. And this is a slight digression, but just a story that I thought was super fascinating here. And maybe we can just touch on it briefly. Speaking of Bitcoin countries, El Salvador, which has very publicly been stacking Bitcoin now for some time, they just announced that they're having a partnership with XAI that, and to quote President Nayib Bukele, will redefine the future of public education. Now, I thought this was really interesting, and I'll bring this all full circle here. But the reason I bring this up is because El Salvador is an incredible, let's say, case study, or it will be looked at that. This is all going to look really obvious in retrospect, right? As people say, oh, wow, what's the blueprint for really turning a country around? Well, it's going to be adopt Bitcoin and stack Bitcoin as a nation state, no matter what size your country is. Change your, first of all, and before you do any of that, clean up your streets, clean up the massive amount of gang violence and crime that you have. And then change your educational system. And so what I see here, I think this is really the reason I think it's kind of important is because this is really setting the stage for, I think, what the nation states of the future will look like. And just goes back to this idea that, this is a way for both Bitcoin and embracing other emergent technologies like AI, and at this point, AI gets thrown around a lot. We're just going to use the term, right? But embracing these emergent technologies like Bitcoin, like AI, is a way for these smaller nations to really be able to leapfrog these so-called developed nations of the world who are busy sitting in their public school classrooms teaching kids how not to misgender each other. Whereas now you're going to have AI agents that are creating personalized tutoring lesson plans for children in El Salvador who already have Bitcoin education as part of their curriculum. I can't help but think, as as we in America are talking about Bitcoin treasury companies, you've got El Salvador that is talking about, nation state level adoption, and you can go back and forth on whether or not that's been a success or not. The reality of the situation is that more people in El Salvador have a actual fundamental knowledge of Bitcoin, how it works, how nodes works, how the networks works, have actually used Bitcoin as a means of payment, not just as a store of value, than basically anywhere in the world. That to me is quite a success. And honestly, seeing this kind of partnership between XAI and the government of El Salvador to improve their public education system, I think that's really incredible to see. I'd love your thoughts on it, though, and just if you think this is kind of what we're seeing in El Salvador really starts to be a bit of a new model for the nation state as we get further into this 21st century.
No, and it's funny. I do agree. It's almost like we're looking at things with a different kind of time horizon. So I want to comment on like the Bitcoin treasury kind of side of things. Is like one, I think you're right in the sense that right now we're in like a transitional period. Like it's almost like we're in eddy, where it's like a blend of salt water and fresh. As we continue to be in that position, there is going to be those kind of companies will exist. Eventually they won't. It's like they didn't, then they do, and then eventually they won't. And it's funny too, because one thing that stood out to me when you were talking about like their ability to acquire Bitcoin, because what jumped in the back of my mind is like, yeah, the ability to acquire Bitcoin on a Bitcoin standard is just profit. That's where it ends, right? It's eventually where it gets. There isn't necessarily, can't take Bitcoin credit to get more Bitcoin necessarily. I guess you kind of could, but that'll be a fun game down the road. And it's funny because specifically to Sailor and strategy and what they're doing right now, I think they're completely untouchable. I don't think anyone can threaten them. Anyone coming from the bottom doesn't have access to the capital in order to actually to make enough strides to get there. And if anyone from the top tried to do so, and that information was leaked or that information went public, the price would run away from them faster than they'd be able to catch up. If Apple and Google and we'll say Meta and Walmart all start saying like, yeah, we're doing the Sailor strategy thing, price is just gone. They won't be able to catch up with it. They cannot enter in serious volume with their brand behind it and not move the price. They could try, but that information being kept under wraps would be unbelievably difficult. Plus, there's only so much available. Like, of course, new supply will come on as demand changes and price moves, but like, there's no way they could move and do what they necessarily would need to catch MicroStrategy. I think at this point in time, it's almost like it's Sailors to lose. Like, just don't. It's like you're so far ahead of the pack. Just don't drop the baton. Like you've got this. Just keep going, keep going. Now, specific to education, I agree. I mean, sometimes I go back and forth in El Salvador. I get some mixed information, but there definitely is some good there, and I'd love to see the education focus because again, if we're talking about on mission, right? First, we're going to get the Samurai devs pardoned. Then we're going to separate state from money, and maybe even before that is separating education from money as well too. And a lot of my recent going back to like the podcast I did with Simon and Dr. Cruz there, they've thrown out this one idea that's really stuck with me. It's like, okay, what's more powerful, controlling the people or controlling the money? And I could make a case for either. So to see that we're getting improvements, we're getting iterations, and hopefully getting eventually away from state-funded education as well, state-controlled education, I do think that's critical. Because again, if you have someone who's been locked up in a fiat prison for 12 years, it's going to take me a really long time to try and convince them that like, no, you are a fish in water and we need to get you out of this and here learn about Bitcoin. So I think regardless of any motivations, it doesn't matter if you're inserting Bitcoin education, whether from the state or from the private sector into the public schooling system or the private schooling system, that is a huge win. We've got to win the informational battle. We got to win the money battle there as well. So I love to see the iteration. And I'm sure, Walker, you and I could go on for long tangents about this, but the existing education system, even the Prussian model of it, it's just preposterous. Like, if you just stop and look at it and go like, do you really think this is the best way that humans can learn? Is that how you learned anything? Because I'll tell you, I learned a lot in the last couple of years, and it did not come from any university or public school. It came from online. AI is very helpful right now, making directions as well. Self-directed reading, YouTube. There's a plethora of things out there. So I'm really glad to see that change. And the next thing that we're missing, the one problem I have with El Salvador, the one big problem I have with El Salvador is not El Salvador. It's that we need somebody else to do this now too. And we need them to iterate on it. There could have been things that were done better. The Chiva Wall launch, I don't think was very great. Maybe we need more of a grassroots adoption. Maybe we start purely focusing on the education. Maybe we just do like no cap gains. Like, don't worry about the, because even the appearance of having Bitcoin as a currency and then having to repeal that within dealing with the IMF is not great. So maybe we just do no cap gains, which we're talking about earlier in the show, which is always a fantastic way to go. That's all we need. And focus, maybe first step is just the education portion. Like, I want to see that experimentation because you're right. It's the It's the cell phone versus the landline moment. Smaller nations that are more nimble, that can move quickly, can have a huge advantage here because they never have to put in like the classic landline telecommunications. They can go right to cell phone. You can skip over a whole lot of bureaucratic nightmare and implement these technologies and these strategies immediately. And I'm not criticizing El Salvador to say that, well, obviously there's things that can be improved upon. Can somebody go out there and please iterate? Can we get the next nation on board so that we can iterate upon that execution, that experiment as well, and get this ball rolling forward? We cannot be reliant on one nation. And this goes back to that idea of mission, is that if you're in a place where you think that like, okay, maybe we would really benefit for Bitcoin, maybe I have the ear of some people, maybe I can try and push this idea forward. I would love to see this spring up in just like another 10 or 12 small nations, which by the way, I do not think, I'm not even pumping my own bags. I don't think that will move the price, but I think it'll give us like 12 more locations to build citadels. It'll give us more information and data on the best means of actually pushing forward Bitcoin adoption, what works, what doesn't, how can we better execute this. We need to see just like we had the Treasury Company experimentation with a whole bunch of people following Michael Saylor, which gave us a ton of new information that we would have necessarily not known about. I thought price was going to run a lot more from these guys than it possibly did. We need people to iterate and experiment with the nation state adoption model so we can collect that data, we can refine it, we can push this out, and we can have optionality in the world as well.
No, I couldn't agree more. And the reason I brought up the El Salvador piece is because as it relates to education, I think this is a really important topic, right? First of all, we're not taught about money in schools, right? And so for people, that's why it's so difficult for people to understand Bitcoin, because we don't actually know what money is. And I look at what El Salvador is doing with this, and I look at how, there's already a ton of case studies that show that basically even just a couple of weeks with focused AI tutoring can basically equate to a full semester's worth of public school learning. And you look at, speaking, you're up there in our American attic up in Canada, but here in America, if you look at some of the large public school districts, so you look at Detroit public schools, for example, they have 10 to 15% literacy rates.
Whoa!
As of 8th grade. That means that's 85 to 90% illiterate, cannot read in 8th grade. Baltimore City Schools, 10 to 15% as well. Cleveland metropolitan area, Milwaukee public schools, all 10 to 15% literacy rates in 8th grade. Philadelphia public schools, 15 to 20% literacy, a little bit higher. But the point is that all of these major school districts have basically 85 to 90% of their 8th graders don't know how to read. They're illiterate. At the same time, their per pupil spending is between, for Detroit public schools, it's $21,000 per year per student. Baltimore, it's between 18 and 22. Cleveland, between $24,000 and $28,000 per student per year. Milwaukee, $18,000 to $20,000. Philadelphia, $20,000. So these are some of the worst cases of it. But the point is that it's not about how much money you spend. This is a massive amount of spending, right? It's about huge levels of bureaucracy and ineffective models of teaching, right? And so if you want to lift a nation up, you need to start with the youth of that nation. You need to start with the kids. You need to start with looking at ways to actually make sure that, instead of the no child left behind bullshit started under the Bush administration, actually make sure that children have a chance to succeed. That's not what the public school system is built for. So the reason I really enjoy this story about El Salvador is that this is at least somebody trying something new. It's iterating, as you said. That's what we need. We need more countries that are going to be iterating on top of these new modes of education. And I think it's frankly just really, really interesting to see. And on the Bitcoin education piece, again, it comes down to the fact that, wow, imagine what it's going to look like in a generation when you have an entire, the previous generation of kids that are now adults in El Salvador grew up learning about Bitcoin. Now, any kid can learn about Bitcoin right now, right? But they're being taught it in their public schools. What now, 2 generations down the road, what does that look like? Because those effects start to compound. And I think it gets really, really interesting. And you start to get to a situation where in the space of a generation or two, you completely change the next 500 years of a country's future. And I think that's really cool. And it's something that we should look at as people who live in the so-called developed world, in developed, Western nations, in Canada, the US, but also, look at the UK, look at the EU right now. And there's a lot of funny business going on. And there's a lot of focus on, quote, protecting the children, which is actually just an excuse for increased surveillance, when in fact we should be focusing on how to lift the children up, how to educate the children more, not how to cut children off from technology as an excuse to really implement totalitarian surveillance on all of us. but instead, how do we look at novel methods of actually improving the chances that our children have of really becoming highly educated, but practically educated? Because just having a degree, we all know that that doesn't mean that you're educated, right? You may have a high degree of education. That doesn't mean that you're smart. Your degree in underwater basket weaving still means you're working at Starbucks, which there's nothing wrong with working at Starbucks. But I'm just saying we have a lot of highly educated people who can't find a job because they spent their times studying things at university that absolutely meant nothing when it came to the real world. So I digress a little bit there, but I did want to bring up this story because I think it's super fascinating. I want to get into a couple of more items. We do need to cut for one more quick commercial break, and that'll be the last commercial, guys, I promise. And then we're going to be back. I want to talk of sort of something about just Bitcoin rubbing off a little bit on Wall Street. Sort of the meme, I'm not trapped in here with you, like you're trapped in here with me. I think that's what we're seeing a little bit. And I'll let you know kind of what stories I'm looking at here, because I think you'll enjoy this, but I would love to get your take on it, Nathan. Stay tuned, guys. We're going to, again, go to one quick commercial break. Then we'll be right back here to round this hour out. Stay tuned.
Don't forget to smash like.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin.
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave, right?
Welcome back to Roxham TV. My name is Walker America, and I am here again with Nathan from Bitcoin Mentor. We have been talking about the Samourai wallet case, the need for President Trump to pardon Bill and Keone, the Samourai wallet developers. We've also been talking about Wall Street and the corporatization of Bitcoin, but perhaps it's actually the Bitcoinization of Wall Street. And that's kind of what I want to finish up with you on, Nathan, because I know we've just got you for a few more minutes here. Basically, this idea that Wall Street is trapped in the room with us. We're not trapped in the room with them. That so many of these companies, whether it be Vanguard being forced to essentially bend the knee and offer Bitcoin services to their clients via the exposure to Bitcoin ETFs, whether it be, any of these larger banks now basically having the ability to offer Bitcoin services. As an example, we've got a tracker here that Roxham TV had posted on our X account, basically Bitcoin products by the top 25 US banks. Now you can see that, of course, there is a mixed bag here, right? You've got some different custody options. Some are exploring, some are launched, different trading options. Some are exploring, some are announced, some are launched. But we're seeing more and more of the traditional fiat system players start to come into Bitcoin. And again, this isn't something that you have to like. You don't have to love it. You don't have to celebrate it. It's just a reality of what it is. But I think ultimately it's a forcing function. It's an acknowledgement that Bitcoin is not going away. They're now realizing, crap, we've been ignoring it for a long time. And perhaps it's time that we figured out how we're going to actually make some money on this, because let's be honest, that is what they ultimately care about, is how are they going to make money on these products. I'd love to get your feedback on it. And because maybe one other thing I'll throw into the mix here is that Wall Street is now banks, they're preparing for around like 24/7 trading. It's not quite 24/7 stock trading. It's actually like 23/7. So not fully. They're going to still shut off for a little while because it's still fiat. You've got to shut off for a little while, or apparently it all comes crashing down. But this is interesting to me. Markets are moving close to this nonstop trading. A lot of these Wall Street firms, the largest banks, they're kind of approaching this shift cautiously. They're citing concerns over cost and liquidity, market stability, But NASDAQ just filed paperwork this week with regulators to extend the trading 23 hours a day on weekdays, following the New York Stock Exchange's earlier move. The New York Stock Exchange's move to expand trading hours on its ARCA platform. So this is interesting to me because it's just Wall Street starting to act more like Bitcoin, while at the same time you could say, okay, we have all these Bitcoin treasury companies. Is Bitcoin starting to act more like Wall Street? How are you looking at this? Am I just drawing connections where am I just coping, or do you see a little bit of what I'm getting at here? That yes, there are, Wall Street is here, but there's a forcing function of Bitcoin actually exerting change on Wall Street as well. It's not just the Wall Streetification and corporatization of Bitcoin, if that makes sense.
Walker, you're dead on. And we've seen this before, my friend. We've seen this in our lifetime. This is Blockbuster responding to Netflix, dude. Oh my goodness. There's this thing that trades 24/7. We better add that too before they eat our lunch. Oh, our clients are asking for it. We better make sure that we have that available for it. In the future, there will totally be Bitcoin custody banks, right? But the only way we get to that future is by having self-custody now and making sure that we kind of have that forcing function. So again, I think that was always going to be the case. Hopefully not people necessarily rely on that sort of thing, but 100% this to be expected. But it kind of reminds me of like a really pretty girl who just can't decide who to date right now. And she's kind of playing the field a little bit like, oh, okay. I've been going kind of steady with the Fed for a long time here, but this Bitcoin guy, this newcomer to school, man, I think he's going to be valedictorian. This dude is really shaping up to really be something special here. So I think it's a completely natural progression. If there is a customer, but ultimately at the end of the day, they're a business, right? And they're probably serving themselves as well as their shareholders, as well as their customers. If they're asking for Bitcoin, they're going to have it there. And because Bitcoin compared to the existing fiat rails is actually better technology, it is a 10 times better technology. It's that blockbuster moment. You're going to kind of have to, right? There's no real keeping up with it at this point. You're going to need to offer it. And with regards to the 23-hour trading, I absolutely love it. There's only one thing that I need from Wall Street. Please don't be a coward. Cut the circuit breakers, guys. Get rid of them. Come and join us in the real world of the free market. Let's see what happens to your indices. Let's see what happens on a Sunday night if Japan has a bit of a freak out. Let's see what happens if you actually trade for 24/7. You don't impose circuit breakers or any sort of limitations. Let's not get rid of the buy button, on GME here. If you actually step into the world of free market voluntary exchange that Bitcoiners have been hardened by and used to, I think you will get destroyed. That whole thing like, oh, Bitcoin's volatile. Their lack of volatility is completely artificial. We've got fiscal spending. We've got QE. QE kind of has started back up again. They will do everything they can to clamp down on that volatility and try to push things up slowly and to the right. But if you start to get into the space where they're losing control, they lose control of the windows. I think it may not look so pleasant, or it may not look so safe being in those traditional assets if they start trading 24/7, especially if we can maybe, I don't know, it's kind of like Marty McFly. Just keep calling him a chicken until they get rid of the circuit breakers as well, too. And I think that's an advertisement for Bitcoin, not a benefit to the stock market.
Yeah, it is really interesting. I mean, it's kind of incredible that you still have, like, it is just so fiat, I guess, to have these circuit breakers where it's like, this stock's moving too much. We got to stop trading on it. And it's like, sure, when Bitcoin starts mooning, does Coinbase, go down? Yeah.
Breaks
But
every time.
you ever somehow inexplicably, they've been doing this for years, and somehow it still goes down every time. Just a coincidence, I'm sure. But it is very interesting that the traditional fiat system doesn't want to let too much volatility in, right? Volatility is scary. Meanwhile, you've got this Bitcoin mentality, which is like, yes, bring on the volatility. Let's see more of it. It's painful to the downside, it's euphoric to the upside, but ultimately the downside represents the best buying opportunities. I still think, and you and I have been talking about this off and on for a couple of weeks since we first went down. You and I were live streaming as Bitcoin was down just below $80,000. And we're still, kind of crabbing along in this space. And it's to me, again, Nathan, I remain extremely bullish. I also remain, just to bring this full circle, I remain really bullish on Bitcoiners and the ability of Bitcoiners to make their voices heard. This comes back to the Samourai case for me. Like, this to me is one of the most bullish things, is seeing Bitcoiners organize in our disorganized way, make our voices heard, and hopefully be able to get these guys, make sure that they stay home for Christmas, that they don't have to spend Christmas in prison. And ultimately, it's like, NGU is at the back of my mind right now. It's the freedom go up that I really, that's what I want for Christmas, is more freedom go up. And I think we're starting to see it. Again, I would just say to people that as you see these narratives shifting, as you see Wall Street moving into the Bitcoin space, because they're realizing that this isn't going away and there's huge potential here, you've got to look at this. Don't let Wall Street shake you out of your bags. We're right now seeing choppy price action, but you know what? You know who's buying? The big money in the institutions are buying, right? The boomers are buying. There's still inflows going into the old PDF ETFs, right? There's all of this money that's still flowing into Bitcoin, corporate money flowing into Bitcoin. Don't be shaken out by some of this choppy price action. This is the time where you really need to bear down, focus on creating value, focus on your craft, focus on your family, focus on saving in Bitcoin. Future you will thank you, even if present you and perhaps present you's wife is a little bit worried about the state of your bank account right now. But that is okay. It will improve. And again, it's dangerous to have too much fiat out there. You need to be careful. But Nathan, I know you've got to head out in a second. Maybe anything you want to wrap up on before I read you out here?
No, I completely agree. Everyone go out and sign the petition. Donate to the families if you can as well, too. And I'd say, no, you guys have a very Merry Christmas, stack Bitcoin. And if anyone wants to come and check out our stuff, I dropped a nice podcast with Dr. Cruz and Simon Dixon on the BTC Sessions channel today. And that's it. That's all for me. All the best, team.
Awesome. Can't wait to check it out. And you guys are doing the BTC Sessions annual live stream, I believe. Is that tomorrow?
That's tomorrow. I will see you there, sir.
I look forward to it. One of my favorite Christmas events every year. Nathan from the Bitcoin Mentor, please do check him out on X at the BTC Mentor and on BTC Sessions channel on YouTube. Really great stuff. Nathan, thanks so much for joining. Always appreciate your perspective. Merry Christmas, and I'll see you tomorrow.
Merry Christmas. See you tomorrow.
All right. Okay, guys, we have about 15 minutes left here of our 3-hour broadcast. And I want to maybe round it out with a couple of stories. Again, I would just take a moment to remind everyone, again, to go to billandkeone.org. You can find that. I've shared it many times on my X account, that particular link. But again, billandkeone.org. Please do sign the petition for Samourai Wallet. Please do donate if you are able. And again, if you're not able, that's okay. You can share it. It's free to share. It's free to sign the petition. No worries there. But take the time. It only takes a couple of minutes, and it really does make a difference. And if you happen to know anybody who is close to the Trump administration, now might be a good time to dust off that phone of yours, give them a call and say, hey, we really think you should pardon Samourai Wallet developers, because this is just something that is in line with the American ethos to have them be free, and quite against the American ethos, the rule of law, and ultimately just common sense to have these guys locked up. So really do encourage everybody to make your voice heard there. Do whatever you can. A lot of voices together can make quite a bit of noise. One by itself is not so loud, but when you get all of us together, you get the honey badgers riled up. We can do a lot of damage in a positive way. One thing I maybe wanted to just kind of round things out with, we've talked about a lot of different narratives today, a lot of different stories today, focusing a lot on the story of the Samourai Wallet developers, but also on Bitcoin policy in America, on the corporatization of Bitcoin, or the Bitcoinization of corporate America. But one thing I want to round out on is corporate America's latest hot job, which I found this really interesting. It's storyteller. And okay, I'll get into why I think this is particularly interesting here in a moment, but I'll just kind of give you a little bit of the background on this. So basically, corporate America is increasingly seeking storytellers as companies are looking to take greater control for their narratives. This is a fragmented media environment. Mainstream media is no longer mainstream. They are legacy media, right? They are on the out. Their numbers are abysmal. More people watch live streamers on X or on Twitch or on Rumble or on YouTube or wherever than watch CNN at prime time. And so based on some LinkedIn data, which, LinkedIn, think of it what you will, but they do have a lot of data on the corporate side of America. The share of US job postings that include the term storyteller doubled over the past year. So this is really just showing that there is a demand across marketing, media, and communication roles. The firms are basically using this title pretty broadly, from content creators and communication strategists to executives tasked with shaping how brands communicate with their customers, investors, and employees. And these roles are being formalized at major companies. Google is hiring a customer storyteller manager for its cloud business. Microsoft recruiting for a senior director of narrative and storytelling in its security unit. Compliance software firm Vanta is offering up to $274,000 a year for a head of storytelling. So there's a lot of other examples of this too. But basically, this theme of storytellers, content creators, being kind of put into pivotal roles in these larger companies as they realize this time that we're living in requires a different sort of attitude, a different sort of perspective, a different sort of approach to really engage with audiences than at any other time in history. Because at a time where, again, trust in institutions is declining, is at really low levels, at a time when trust in independent content creators, independent journalists is rising because you want to find a personality that you like, someone that you believe is going to be truthful, that is going to provide their own spin on what's happening, give you their own personal flavor. And that's the person you tune into instead of whoever's sitting behind the CNN or Fox or MSNBC news desk. This is a really powerful thing. And so, this is really just, again, coming back to a deeper structural change in the kind of United States and broadly throughout the world. The US newsroom employment has fallen really drastically over the past 2 decades. Shocker. And print circulation and digital traffic for legacy media outlets continue to go down. Again, there's just not as many people reading the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal as there once was. And at the same time, executives are talking about storytelling on earnings calls, investor days. They're signaling that narrative control is now a strategic asset. And I think this is true both for corporate America, but also for the nation state. It's all about narrative control at a time when controlling the narrative has never been more difficult. Because again, we no longer have a one-to-many, one-way broadcast medium. That's what traditionally the legacy media, when it was still the mainstream, was. Some guy talks in front of a camera, it's broadcast out to all the news stations, and there's no feedback loop. There's no talking back to him. There's no ratioing that news anchor on Twitter. There's none of that, right? There's just them broadcasting, they're just giving you the news at 9. And that is what the truth is supposed to be, that they shape the narrative. But now anyone can shape the narrative. Social media allows that. Centralized social media is, of course, always subject to capture. There's always a throat to choke when it's centralized social media. That's why things like Nostr are so important. Being able to have a social media protocol, a communication protocol that is outside of the control of these centralized organizations or of any government. But I think this is also really interesting because it dovetails with the idea of, AI generated content is currently flooding the internet. There's AI slop everywhere, right? And, people want, I think, at a time when AI slop is so pervasive, at a time where you are inundated with content that can be generated with the click of a mouse that requires no actual work on the creator's part, on the prompter's part, let's say. Yeah, there's electricity that goes into it behind the scenes at large data centers all over the world, but it's incredibly low effort. It's incredibly easy to produce a lot of noise, and there is a lot of noise being produced. At a time where all of this noise exists, I think that we're going to see people really gravitate towards signal that is distinctly human. People want to know that there's an actual human behind what they're listening to. I'm a human right now, as far as I know. I am not an AI generated talking head here, right? This is me. This is Walker America. You know that when you tune in, you're going to hear me talking. You're not going to hear some AI slop, right? And so I think this is important because we're also seeing a trend. There was a new application launched on Nostr which filled up its iOS beta test flight in a matter of hours, extremely rapidly. It's called Divine, Divine. It's a play on the old app Vine that existed, had video, short form video. Now short form video, for anyone who's younger watching this, short form video is just an expectation. It's everywhere. It's on TikTok. It's on Instagram. I guess it's on Facebook. I don't really go on Facebook anymore, but Facebook, Instagram is Facebook, whatever. It's on X. It's everywhere you go. There is short form video content. But where that started was with Vine. And Vine had short form video content before Instagram added videos. Instagram just had pictures for a while. I know it's hard to believe, but some of us can in fact remember back that far. Vine went away, much to the sadness of many folks who used it, such as myself. It is now back, built on top of a decentralized social media and communication protocol called Nostr, notes and other stuff transmitted by relays. This is also really fascinating because one of the things that they're doing at Divine is actively filtering out AI-generated content. They're doing this because they understand that people want a distinctly human experience. People don't want more and more and more AI slop ad nauseum. They want humans making actual content that takes them some time, that takes them some thought and ingenuity, that's not just prompting. They want to know that something is real. So I think in a world that's increasingly fake, that's increasingly AI generated, we're going to see more trends back to this. And this comes back to this larger news story about storytelling. Again, all news, all narrative control is all about storytelling. Bitcoin is really all about storytelling as well. Bitcoin adoption, right? It's the stories that we tell that are able to kind of galvanize the next wave of adoption, right? Those stories shift, the narrative shift. But this is a time where being an independent content creator, being an independent media outlet like Roxham TV, shout out to the great team here, being an independent journalist, it's never been easier to do so, but it's also never been harder to stand out amidst all of the noise that's out there. So, I hope that we see more of a trend towards people really gravitating towards real news done by real people in an age where there is so much AI slop. And ultimately, I hope that you keep on tuning back in every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern here for this show on Roxham TV. We do not have any AI anchors yet at this point. It is all human beings. Again, as far as I know, perhaps we're all just living in a simulation, and I am, in fact, just an AI anchor. I'm not quite sure. I guess I wouldn't know either way. But just something to think about here as I close out is, what kind of stories are the most important ones to tell? What kind of stories are the most important ones to really get traction and picked up? A lot of the stories that you hear are doom and gloom. It's rage bait. Again, it's AI slop being used to rage bait. It's stories of human suffering and human strife and human conflict. And there are also really good stories out there, right? I think there are a lot of great stories happening in and around Bitcoin right now. A lot of really inspiring stories. I think there's also stories of injustice that are really important that we talk about. This is why we spent so much time talking here today on Roxham TV about the injustice that was brought against the Samourai wallet developers, Bill and Keone. Again, I would say go to billandkeone.org. Do sign that petition. Do donate if you can. If not, just share it. It's free to share. And think about that a little bit. I guess what I would leave you with is, in a time where there is so much noise, the ability to find signal in that noisy world has never been more difficult, but also never been more important. So I hope that this show continues to be somewhere where you can find signal in a noisy world. I hope you find this show valuable. We're going to be doing more and more coverage on this show of not just Bitcoin related content, but also weaving in these larger narratives, these larger global news stories, trying to really give you a well-rounded perspective on not just what's happening in Bitcoin and why it's important, but also what else is happening out there in the world that is also important, that weaves together, that dovetails with these narratives around Bitcoin, that fits in with these larger stories, these generational cycles that we're undergoing. We are in the middle of a fourth turning. Things are getting chaotic. They've been chaotic for quite some time. They will continue to be so. But the best thing that you can do during a fourth turning is to try and keep your head about you. Find signal wherever you can amidst the noise. Find the voices that you trust, that you want to hear from when it comes to delivering you that signal. And do your best to amplify the signal that you do find. Because if we amplify signal, it becomes a lot easier for others to distinguish it from the noise. The biggest piece of signal that I am paying attention to right now is, again, the groundswell of support around the Samourai wallet developer pardon movement. Again, I'll say it one more time, billandkione.org, sign the petition, donate if you can, share, that is free. We're now running up to the end of my 3-hour segment, guys. I appreciate you all being here very much. Again, I am here every Tuesday from 1 p.m. to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're going to be talking about Bitcoin. We're going to be talking about world news. We're going to be talking about stories and narratives and how to find signal in this noisy world. But for now, we are going to be talking about me going off air and ending this stream. I appreciate you all being here very much. This was really, this streams are always a pleasure. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to Zach and Stephen and Nathan. Great having those guys on. For now, I will say goodbye to you all. It's been a pleasure here being with you. Again, I'll see you next week, 1 to 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time here on Roxham TV. Again, my name is Walker America. Have a great night.
So, tell us about your furry friend here. What's his name?
Oh, this? This is Bitcoin.
Bitcoin?
It's not just a cat, he's family.
Quite a name, and I must say, looks quite pampered.
Oh, absolutely. Bitcoin deserves nothing but the best. He's my little prince.
But with such a valuable pet, aren't you afraid of losing him?
Losing Bitcoin? No, it never happened before, so it's not something I worry about. Excuse me for a moment. Bitcoin, stay here, right?
Bitcoin, no! Bitcoin, come on, little buddy, Bitcoin, I need you. Don't go.
Security matters. Zappo Bank. The only way to bank your Bitcoin. Apply now at zappobank.com.
Some call me Chicken Little, others Bubble Boy. I'm a bit changed, but sounds familiar, right? Let me tell you a hard truth. The S&P isn't rising, the dollar's falling. That's the trick. Monopoly money. It's ice melting by the second. Your savings, your salary, your time. Worth less every second. Everyone's using the wrong measuring stick. Switch the denominator. Price the S&P into Bitcoin. Hard, fixed, unprintable. Suddenly your unstoppable index, it's collapsing. And while you cling to dollars, well, Wall Street already switched. Before, you needed 2 brokers.
Still getting my ninja bonus though, right?
Plenty of spreadsheets. And my quant!
I hate this part.
I was right, and I'll be right again. If I were you, I'd thank me.
You know my name's Dave.